The third generation of the Dark Lord comes from Hogwarts. Chapter 61. Pure white and flawless, not a trace of dirt can be seen on the whole body. Under the moonlight, it shines with a little bit of brilliance. It's a unicorn. This was the first time Yagus saw such a pure creature. I can't help but admire it from the bottom of my heart. That's our goal this time. Your mission is to kill this beast and take out its blood. Voldemort's tone was urgent and he didn't care about Quirrell's struggle. Teacher, you are cursed if you kill a unicorn. Yagus' face was calm, showing no signs of moving. He was just here for a formality, how could he be stupid enough to involve himself in it? The so-called Voldemort's teachings were just a means he used to improve himself. Even without Voldemort, he still has the system, Aunt Vita, and his cheap dad. To be tainted with an indelible curse just for Voldemort's guidance is tantamount to drinking poison to quench one's thirst. Yagos, this is the second time. Voldemort's eyes were bloodshot and he stared into Argus' eyes. If you delay for a while longer, the unicorn will escape. Kill it and I will help you get rid of the curse. Argus looked at the top of Voldemort's head and then at his pale face. The meaning is obvious. Do you think I'm stupid? If you have this ability, why do you still need to suck the blood of this thing? It's okay to brag, but don't brag until you believe it. The rustling sounds around him became more and more obvious, and even the weak Voldemort noticed that something strange seemed to have happened around him. You don't need to take action, you are responsible for guarding, don't let it escape. Voldemort saw that his command could not move Argus, and in his desperation, he did not care about anything else. She gave him a cold look, took out her wand and started to do it herself. Hiss. At this moment, several streams of white viscous liquid sprayed out from not far away. All of them were aimed at Voldemort and Argus. Immediately afterwards, countless black shadows came densely. The small one is about the size of a hunting dog, and the big one is as big as a carriage. It's the Acromantula. That hybrid giant dared to put the Acromantula into the Forbidden Forest. Voldemort was shocked and angry. Back then, he commanded the basilisk to kill Myrtle, and then blamed Hagrid and his Acromantula. He didn't expect that a case committed decades ago would give him such a big surprise today. If he were in his prime, he would certainly not be afraid of this. But now, he couldn't even cast a few spells without taking a breath, and it was a fluke that he could find the unicorn. Who knows when I will find it next time. The unicorn by the lake noticed the movement here and ran away without saying a word. Avada eats the big melon. Voldemort chewed the big melon and threw it away. Unfortunately, there were too many Acromantulas nearby, so he didn't have time to take aim, and was dodged sideways by the unicorn. Thunderbolt explosion. Split into pieces. Yagus fired several magic spells, instantly smashing the approaching Acromantula to pieces. The powerful force raised a large amount of leaf dust. Withdraw, teacher. If you continue to stay, these spiders will only grow in number. Hold on a little longer. I'm going to kill that beast. Voldemort obviously didn't want to give up easily. He gritted his teeth and chased in the direction of the unicorn again. Understood, teacher. Yagus nodded respectfully and promised quite well. He turned around and threw several large-scale magic spells at the weakest part of the encirclement. Run away quickly. Without Argus' figure, all the Acromantulas rushed towards Voldemort. After a while, he was surrounded. Yagos, you, are very good. After being betrayed, Voldemort's back molars were almost broken. Ignoring his weak body and Quirrell's wails. Quickly release one spell after another. Fortunately, the killing curse just hit the ground and caused a lot of rocks to collapse. Scratched the skin of some unicorns. Somewhat stained with blood. He sped up and rushed towards the unicorn's position. He waved his wand and a few drops of silver-white blood slowly floated to the surface. With Quirrell roaring in fear, he took it into his mouth. The next second, the originally weak Voldemort seemed to have regained his consciousness. The whole person's aura is completely different from before. With a casual wave of the magic spell, dozens of Acromantulas rapidly expanded like balloons. Bang! 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 Dozens of explosions were heard, and the Forbidden Forest, which was noisy just now, fell silent in the blink of an eye. The entire forest was covered in disgusting green slime. Voldemort looked at the direction Argus was leaving and let out a sinister laugh. Yagos. My good disciple. You are really good. For his behavior of betraying his teammates, Yagus did not feel the slightest guilt. How much money you take, how many things you do. You still want me to work overtime for you without salary. What a joke. It would be great if I could go with you. Do you really expect me to work hard for you? Passing through the secret passage marked on the Marauder's map, Yagus sneaked back to the dormitory. After a comfortable sleep, we arrived at the Hogwarts Hall early the next morning. While enjoying breakfast happily, Quirrell walked in from the front door. His face was still pale, but his energy was much better, and his walking pace was not as frivolous as the previous 2 days. Seeing Yagus, a smile appeared on his face. It's just that this smile has a bit of hatred in it. Professor Quirrell, good morning. Yagus took the initiative to say hello, which surprised Quirrell. Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Grindelwald. It seems that Professor, you had a good rest last night and you look much better than before. Normally, Voldemort would not show up. He will only take action when teaching Yagus or when there are other important matters. Now they were having a meal in the hall, and there were several professors there, so Yagus was sure that Voldemort would not dare to show his face. I want to judge Voldemort's condition from Quirrell. Compared to Voldemort, Quirrell is much easier to fool. Just 2 sentences of dialogue made Yagus feel that the other party had a lot of confidence. Obviously, many unforeseen events happened after he left last night. Yagus calculated that Quirrell would not dare to fall out with him in public. The clichés became more and more vigorous. Idiot, hurry up and leave. Can't you see he's trying to trick you? Voldemort's angry voice sounded in Quirrell's head. Only then did Quirrell react and left in a hurry. Yagus smiled. It seemed that Voldemort's condition was far from being as good as he thought. It is estimated that it won't be long before he will make another trip to the Forbidden Forest. This time, don't blame yourself for selling him at a good price. Time flies, and more than a month has passed. Christmas is just a few days away. In the West, Christmas is as grand as the New Year in the East. Because the holiday was coming soon, Hogwarts was filled with a cheerful atmosphere. What remains unchanged is that Harry and Ron still haven't found any information about Nico Flamel. In other words, without Hermione's reminder, these 2 people would have forgotten about Nico Flamel. Quirrell and Voldemort were also having a hard time. The unicorn blood obtained in the Forbidden Forest last time was not enough to last for long. Yagus, the only person who could help him, had no contact since that early morning. Even the Saturday class has never come again. But Voldemort could vaguely feel that the other party was always paying attention to his movements. Although he doesn't know Yagus's purpose, it's definitely not a good thing. In the dormitory, Yagus was packing his things and planned to go back during the holiday. They say they are packing, but in fact they are just bringing a few unfinished books. During this period of time, he did not earn many achievement points, but relying on his own talent, he also made great progress. Relying on his own talent, the disarming spell successfully advanced to the 7th level, and other spells have also made more or less progress. Go back and update your equipment, just waiting for the last battle of the year. Take the Hogwarts Express all the way to platform 9 3/4. An elegant woman in green robe was looking at him quietly from a distance. A heartfelt smile spread across Yagus's face. Aunt Vita, long time no see. One semester at Hogwarts was the first time Argus had been separated from Vita for a long time since he traveled to the magical world of Harry Potter. After spending many years together day and night, Vita has gradually replaced the role of his mother in his life. The only thing that puzzled him was that the other party seemed to have a special liking for dark green robes. She is like this, and so is Professor McGonagall. Do old women like dark green? Let's go, take you home. Vita didn't know what was going through Yagus's head. When he saw him standing there blankly, he thought it was because he hadn't seen her for too long. He stepped forward, took his hand, and led him out of the station. The 2 came to an uninhabited corner, and after several apparitions, they appeared in the manor they had purchased. I haven't been back for a while, but the manor is still neat and tidy. There is no dust or weed at all, which is obviously due to Vita's regular maintenance. Want to eat something? I've prepared a lot of your favorite food. After enjoying the delicacies of the house elves at Hogwarts, and then letting Argus enjoy Weta's craftsmanship that has not improved in the past 10 years, it is obviously difficult to swallow. Try to clear most of the food on the table. Yagus rubbed his slightly forced smile and picked up the recent income statement of the Saints Group. The above shows that in just a few months, the profit has reached nearly 20,000 gold galleons. You know, in the magical world, the monthly salary of an ordinary wizard is 60 to 80 gold galleons. The professors at Hogwarts only have about 250 to 300 coins. Harry, known as the little rich man in the wizarding world, inherited only tens of thousands of gold galleons. It's the accumulation of countless years by the Potter family. Sure enough, no matter which world, the most profitable thing is always capital. Yagus sighed. I have only opened a shop for a few months and can save 10,000 or 20,000 gold galleons. How much does a British pureblood have to save after so many years of business? Not to mention people like the Malfoy family who are engaged in real estate. Continue looking at the papers on the table. Seeing the report showing that other stores in Diagon Alley have adopted the same sales methods as Saints in order to protect their own profits, Yagus couldn't help but laugh out loud. You guys really don't want to use your brain at all. Do you think you can make money by learning my sales methods? Just in time, Christmas is coming soon, let me show you what real marketing is. As Yagus said, he called Vita to his side and explained his Christmas sales plan to her in detail. Vita was stunned for a moment after hearing this. Will this work? Will our profits? Small profits but quick turnover. What's more, we don't make small profits, we just make a little less per item. Yagus explained patiently. Aunt Vita, a product is only called a product if it is sold. It is worthless if you hold it dry in your hands. What's more, we have already established a firm foothold in Diagon Alley, and the next plan to replace Gringotts requires the support of a large amount of gold galleons. The right way is to turn the inventory in hand into gold galleons as much as possible. Do you have any arrangements with Gringotts? Vita knew that when it came to business, Argus's mind was far ahead of hers. So instead of getting too hung up on this issue, choose to ask the other side. Gringotts has been quiet for too long. I remember the last time something happened was when I just started school. Understood. Vita smiled knowingly. If you want to talk about business, I may not be good at it. But if you want to say this kind of thing, I understand it very well. Grindelwald often did similar work back then, and now he has the opportunity to return to his old profession. Remember to make a big fuss and let Gringotts' big clients see it with their own eyes. Don't worry, leave it to me. 3 days later, Christmas came. The entire Diagon Alley is filled with a cheerful atmosphere, and gift boxes and pendants symbolizing Santa Claus can be seen everywhere on the street. The wizards who were supposed to be wandering around, taking their families to do some shopping, were now all gathered around the Saint's shop. Even if it was overcrowded, it could not stop these people from going crazy. This morning, they received a message as soon as they arrived in Diagon Alley. During the Christmas period, all products in the Saints Group's stores will be sold at reduced prices, and a full discount mechanism will be activated. 10 gold galleons will be reduced by 3, 20 gold galleons will be reduced by 7, and 50 gold galleons will be reduced by 20. The more you sell, the more you lose. Support cross-store merger. The wizard's arithmetic ability was not strong to begin with, and he was already dizzy when he heard about the discount. What's more, there's a full discount. 1/8 makes 8, 286, Women's Day on March 8th. What's the difference between rounding up and giving it away for free? In desperation, a group of wizards didn't bother to go shopping, and they all flocked to the Saint's shop like crazy. If Argus hadn't made preparations in advance, the first stampede accident in the wizarding world would have occurred at Saint's birth. Shopping guide, bring me a pint of Acromantula venom. Okay, sir, here is your receipt. Please take it. There is a special cashier at the end of the street. They will calculate the total gold galleons you spent this time based on your receipt. After you pay, deliver the goods to you. Shopping guide, I want a bird and snake feather. Shopping guide, please have a pint of poisonous leopard saliva. Shopping guide, I want a wizard robe. Before a young wizard could finish speaking, countless wizards rushed forward behind him. Originally, Yagus arranged for about 10 shopping guides in one store, which he thought was more than enough. But looking at the current situation, not to mention 10, even 20 may not be enough. The aura responsible for maintaining order in the store had long been squeezed into nowhere. Many even joined the rush buying trend. They do life-threatening work and only earn more than 100 gold galleons a month. If you want to buy the necessary materials and potions, you have to save them for a long time. It's hard to come across a discount promotion, how could you let it go so easily? Ladies and gentlemen, please don't worry, the Saints store has plenty of supplies. There will never be any out of stock or out of stock situations, so there is no need to be impatient and please queue up in an orderly manner. As noon approached, not only did the popularity of the Saints shop not diminish, but it became even more crowded due to word of mouth among wizards. Yagus also stood up at this time, pointed his wand at his throat, and explained to everyone. The wizards waiting outside the store don't need to worry, we have prepared a rest area for you, and there is unlimited supply of tea and drinks. There was a burst of cheers from the crowd. Yagus gestured to the Saint members behind him with his eyes, and tables and chairs were immediately placed near the shop. At the same time, a long cordon was put up at the door to prevent too many people from flooding in like in the morning. Not far away, the back molars of several pure blood shop owners gnashed. By learning from the Saints' sales model, they managed to secure current customers. Knowing that Christmas was coming, I lowered the price again. Who would have thought that the other party would be so generous? Now it's too late for them to lower the price. All the wizards have been sucked away by the Saints and don't come here at all. Look at the Saints' side, it's so crowded that you can't even squeeze in. Looking at my side, there is no more than one slap in total, including the boss and employees. Several bosses are crying. At this moment, a violent explosion sounded. Boom. The wizards who were originally shopping in a hurry were confused by the sudden explosion. I was a little overwhelmed for a while. Even the surrounding aurors were stunned. Ever since the death of Voldemort, such vicious incidents have not happened in the British wizarding world for who knows how long. What's more, this is Diagon Alley. The one that exploded was Gringotts, which was the most heavily defended. All members of the Saints prepare for war. Follow me and be on alert. Yagus, who had expected it, pretended to be shocked for a while, and immediately led a group of Saint members to make a warning. After leaving some members to maintain order, a large number of Saints followed Argus and surrounded Gringotts. No one noticed, Vita and a small group of Saints quietly blended in. Yagus was not worried about Vita's actions. All he wanted from Vita was to cause chaos and make as much noise as possible to lower Gringotts' reputation again. He was attacked twice in a row and lost a gold galleon. No matter how you think about it, something feels wrong. What do you want to do with all these people gathered around? Robbery. Before Yagus could enter, several goblins rushed out from the door. Angrily, he blocked all the Saints in front of the door. I'm sorry, Mr. Goblin, we just heard an explosion in Gringotts and came to see if there is anything we need help with. When there are outsiders, Yagus always shows courtesy and elegance that ordinary people can't match. No need. No one is allowed in Gringotts, please leave. Okay, sir. Yagus turned around and left without any nostalgia. His goal had been achieved, and Vita was successfully picked up by him without any suspicion. If you continue to pester, it will make people think that he has bad intentions. But this retreat is not that simple in the eyes of other wizards. Argos's polite and gentle image has long been deeply rooted in people's hearts, compared to the pure blood shop with its nostrils turned upward and Gringotts who are eager to get money. The Saints group, which runs big promotions from time to time, is obviously more popular. A large number of wizards fought for Yagus. A bunch of short-lived idiots who don't understand good people. Mr. Grindelwald came to help regardless of his own business, and you didn't say thank you and kicked him out. What the hell? Who knows what happened inside? Maybe it was these goblin thieves shouting to catch the thief. I guess so. These goblins have been staring at the galleons in our pockets all day long. Last time something happened, they said they didn't lose anything. This time they won't let anyone in, making it clear that something is inside. Nonsense. You are talking nonsense. Several goblins were extremely excited and even rushed out of Gringotts to attack the wizards who were talking. Thunderbolt explosion. Yagus waved his wand and blasted an explosive spell at the door of Gringotts. The huge roar caused several goblins to stop instantly. Goblin, are you going to launch a third rebellion? In one sentence, the leading goblin was so frightened that he broke into a cold sweat. It also caused all nearby wizards to immediately pick up their wands and stare at Gringotts with wary expressions. Goblins had two rebellions in the wizarding world, in the 16th and 18th centuries respectively. During the two wars, the wizarding world suffered heavy losses, and the goblins completely lost the foundation for their survival, and could only survive by clinging to Gringotts. But the battle between the two has never stopped, and to this day, there are still many goblins trying to overthrow the wizard's rule. A few flashes of light suddenly lit up around them, and several reporters raised their cameras, aiming at Gringotts and Argos and taking snaps. They originally just wanted to come here to buy something, but they never imagined that they would encounter such a big thing. Whether it was the attack on Gringotts or the battle that almost broke out just now, it was all big news that could make the front page. Respected wizard, I was just too excited. Don't worry, we'll leave right away. A group of goblins were almost frightened to death by Yagis's words. Looking at the cannibalistic looks of a group of wizards, he didn't even dare to say a word and hurriedly returned to Gringotts. Okay, thank you for your help. Yagis bowed slightly, gaining the favor of a large number of wizards. Mr. Grindelwald is welcome. This is what we should do. That's right, I've long disliked these goblins. I really don't know what Gringotts is doing. In 2 days, I will withdraw all the galleons I have saved. I can't trust them. Everyone's attitude towards Gringotts was extremely bad. The belated Auror finally arrived. Led by Scrimgeour. Seeing Argus blocking the door of Gringotts. Take out your magic wand immediately. Mr. Grindelwald, I think you need to explain why you are here. Scrimgeour has never had a good impression of the Saints group. Even though Fudge warned him more than once, he still often sent people to investigate the Saints' movements. What he didn't expect was that before Yagis took any action, the wizards around him took action first. Each one looked like a formidable enemy. Dozens of wizards surrounded a group of Aurors. Whether it was Yagis who ignored the store business and led the Saints to come to the rescue, or whether he did not hesitate to break up with Gringotts and release a curse to protect the wizard, they all saw it. Unconsciously, the balance in my heart gradually tilted towards the young man in front of me. And now, the Aurors of the Ministry of Magic are going to attack Argus without asking any questions. How can they stand it? What are you going to do? I tell you, I represent the British Ministry of Magic. Put your wand down. Scrimgeour didn't expect that his simple action would cause such a big reaction, and he didn't dare to act rashly for a while. He could only roar and ask the wizards around him to stop. After shouting for a long time, no one paid any attention to him. Some of the angry ones even had a red light on their wands. A group of Aurors looked around warily. Stop! I am the head Auror and I order you to stop. Do you know how serious a crime it is to attack an Auror? Stop everyone. Scrimgeour kept talking, trying every means to get everyone to stop. However, no one paid any attention to him. No matter how Scrimgeour shouted, no matter what threats he made, he just wouldn't listen. It's useless for anyone to come, no one is willing to put down the wand. Yagis gently raised his right hand. Stop it. As soon as they heard Yagis speak, many people slowly lowered their wands in their hands. Put it down. Stop holding the wand. Listen to Mr. Grindelwald. Yes, listen to Mr. Grindelwald. The crowd slowly dispersed, and one of them felt confused and angrily spat in Scrimgeour's direction. Scrimgeour froze. I shouted for so long without any effect. You said something and they stopped. How come you, a store owner, can speak more effectively than I, the head Auror? Squeak. The door to Gringotts slowly opened. A group of goblins almost cried when they saw Scrimgeour as if they were a relative. He added some exaggeration to what Yagis had just done. He was completely unaware of the increasingly dangerous looks from the people around him. Several quick-reacting Aurors took advantage of the confrontation between the two sides and learned what happened from other people's mouths. He hurried to Scrimgeour's side and explained the whole story. He spoke more objectively, and did not put all the blame on Yagis like the goblin did. He did not deliberately exaggerate the tall image of Yagis, but just described what happened. After Scrimgeour heard this, he did not let everyone leave directly. He still stared at Yagis with a pair of cruel eyes. Judging from what happened, there was nothing wrong with what Yagis did, and there was nothing questionable about it. But his keen intuition as an Auror told him that this matter had nothing to do with the Saints. You guys wait here and keep an eye on them. I'll take another team in to take a look. Scrimgeour did not forget the business. After giving the order to his Auror, he took a deep look at Argus and led the people towards Gringotts. During this period, Argus didn't want to waste time here, but the other Aurors got a hint from Scrimgeour and were unwilling to let them leave. This move once again caused dissatisfaction among the wizards. Yagis, who didn't want to think about the conflict, raised his hand and motioned for everyone to wait quietly. After about half an hour, there was still no movement in Gringotts. It is noon at this moment, and even in winter, the dazzling sunshine still makes people unable to open their eyes. Some wizards have become impatient, increasingly dissatisfied with the behavior of the Ministry of Magic Aurors, and are clamoring to leave. What do you, the Ministry of Magic, do for food? Are we doing anything wrong when we help? That's right. Let us go quickly. Otherwise, don't blame us for being rude. Honey, please calm down and stop talking. Shut up. If you interrupt again, I will never let you interrupt again. Quote. Seeing the crowd getting more and more violent, several Aurors could only turn to Argus for help. But Yagis didn't want to stay here any longer. I still have a lot of business waiting for me over there. What if I am delayed here for too long and there is a problem with the business of the Saints' store? Who is responsible for the loss? Just when the several Aurors were beginning to lose control, Scrimgeour walked out of Gringotts with a few goblins. What's the fuss about? Director, the wizard here wants to go back, are we? Scrimgeour waved his hand. Let them go back. Several Aurors breathed a sigh of relief. Just as everyone was about to leave, Scrimgeour's sinister voice sounded again. But Mr. Grindelwald, you want to come with us? Me. Yagis's heart tightened, and then he remembered that he was not present at the scene when the crime occurred, and his tense body slowly relaxed. When the explosion occurred at Gringotts, I was hosting an event in the store and was not at the scene. I wonder why Mr. Scrimgeour wanted to arrest me. Mr. Grindelwald does have an alibi, but your saint does not. Scrimgeour sneered and looked at the saints behind Argus. Mr. Grindelwald, you make your own choice. Should you come with me, or should you let your saints members do it? I'd rather have your saints come over. After all, it's easier to open their mouths than it is for you. Yagos. Vita subconsciously pulled out the wand and stood in front of Yagis. Yagis smiled slightly and gently put down Vita's hand. Okay, I'll go with you. Choose to be aware of current affairs. Scrimgeour smiled as if his plan had succeeded, and glanced at several Aurors, who immediately stepped forward to arrest Argus. How can the Saint members see this? They take out their magic wands and take action. Don't move. Yagis's voice was still so gentle, but there was an unquestionable coldness in his tone. Eyes turned to Scrimgeour. I hope you won't regret your choice. Ha ha ha. Mr. Grindelwald doesn't need to worry about this matter. Let's go. Scrimgeour was very proud of having achieved his goal and left without looking back. Let me go. Why are you holding me? The witch, who had previously threatened her husband not to interrupt, angrily broke free from her husband's restraints. You are still not a man. Mr. Grindelwald would not hesitate to fight the goblins of Gringotts for us. It's not easy to still be sympathetic to us ordinary wizards in Diagon Alley, at such a big discount. In the end, this is what you did to him. Watching him being captured by the Ministry of Magic. Everyone at the scene was silent. Many people lowered their heads in shame at her words, and the wizards all clenched their fists. They all saw what Yagis did. What does the explosion at Gringotts have to do with him? Why did Yagis take the lead in bringing people to support him even though he knew he would cause trouble? Isn't it just to protect them? He knew the consequences, but without any hesitation, he stood up resolutely. But when it was their turn, Wife, stop talking. The trained wizard did not dare to raise his head, so he could only gently tug at the corner of his wife's clothes and beg in a low voice. Go away. Why did I marry such a loser like you? The witch was already angry, but she became even more angry when she heard what her husband said. Let me tell you, I'm going to the Ministry of Magic now to ask for details. If you still have some conscience, ask yourself what you have done. After saying that, he apparated away. Only a group of guilty wizards were left looking at each other. The British wizarding community was in an uproar. This time of year is a day for wizards to reunite, celebrate and relax. Everyone will choose this day to enjoy some hard-earned peace. But now, this convention is broken. On Christmas Eve, such a vicious incident happened in Gringotts. Instead of investigating the murderer, the Aurors from the Ministry of Magic attacked a man who was actively helping with the rescue. Malfoy Manor. Lucius frowned slightly. How does the Ministry of Magic do things? Dad, Yagus was wronged, go and help him. Draco heard the news and immediately rushed to Lucius's study. I'll go to a few other families first and ask them to go to the Ministry of Magic to ask Fudge what's going on. Narcissa, please accompany Draco to prepare for tonight's dinner. Don't worry, go ahead. Similar scenes also occur within many pure-blood families. Hogwarts. Principal's office. The deans of the 4 houses gathered in front of Dumbledore. I know why you are here. Headmaster, Argus is a good boy. He just helped with maintenance. What's wrong? We can't just watch him being wronged. Professor Sprout interrupted Dumbledore and said with a serious expression. The right and wrong of this matter are indeed clear at a glance. Professor Flitwick nodded in agreement. No matter what, the students of Hogwarts cannot be slandered. Professor McGonagall made the final decision. Snape said nothing, but his eyes said everything. With the help of Vita, the news spread rapidly. Many old men and women in the Saints have deep connections in the UK. After receiving the news, they immediately began to contact some of their old friends. These people may not be in high positions, but they are at least among the industry elites. Their joint question requires even the British Ministry of Magic to respond seriously. The Weasley family in Romania also heard about this. Mrs. Molly, who was once an elite Auror, was so angry that she almost cursed. How could they do such a thing? What a good boy Yagus is, we must never let him be wronged. Then let's go see Charlie. What else are you looking at? Go back to England right away. I want to ask Scrimgeour what the hell he is doing. Although Ginny on the side did not know the composition of the members of the Ministry of Magic, she kept nodding. That's right. Ask them carefully. British Ministry of Magic. Inside the Auror's office. Yagus sat in the chair, his expression unchanged, no different from home. Several Aurors looked at him warily, fearing that he would do something unpredictable. A woman with pink hair and a leather jacket pushed open the door and broke in. Tonks, what are you doing in here? I'm warning you, this person is very dangerous. The director said no one is allowed to get close. Tonks seemed to have heard some big joke. Dangerous. Tell me, how dangerous can an 11-year-old child who has just entered school be? He did something heinous and you are going to do this to him. Tonks completely ignored the warnings of several colleagues and came to Yagus on her own. Take out some pieces of bread and put them on the table. Are you hungry? Eat something quickly. Sensing Argus' confused look, Tonks smiled. Don't worry, there's no magic in these breads. As he said that, he picked up a piece one by one and put it into his mouth. Only then did Yagus remember who the woman in front of him was. Member of the Order of the Phoenix, disguised Magus, Lupin's wife. Her mother, a member of the Black family, married a Muggle and gave birth to her. According to seniority, Bella and Narcissa should be called Aunt. In the original work, she was a very rebellious witch with a righteous heart, and eventually died in the final battle with Lupin. I didn't expect to see her here. However, considering the other party's rebellious psychology and strong sense of justice, it is reasonable for him to be willing to help him. Eat quickly. Seeing that Yagus didn't move, Tonks urged again. At this moment, the door suddenly opened. Scrimgeour came in and was furious when he saw the bread on the table. Who brought it to him? Who allowed you to bring whatever you want in? When did the Ministry of Magic rule that children are not allowed to bring bread to eat? Tonks didn't show any fear, she rushed forward and fought Scrimgeour. Is he a child? He is a criminal. What crime did he commit? Saving people. Or not giving candy to our head Auror? Nymphadora. What did you call me? Tonks became furious when she heard the name. The word Nifa is pronounced very similarly to a less elegant word in English. This makes her extremely sensitive to her name, and everyone she has come into contact with basically knows about it. Scrimgeour now called out directly, somewhat with the intention of finding trouble. Director, calm down. Several Aurors winked at the people next to them, and a female Auror wisely pulled Tonks out of the door. One of them was in Scrimgeour's ear and was saying something. The specific content could not be heard clearly, but Yagus faintly heard a few words. Minister, there is a lot of noise outside. A confident smile appeared on his face. You can ignore public opinion, but you must not ignore it. Otherwise, once there is a backlash, the consequences will not be bearable by ordinary people. Scrimgeour showed dissatisfaction. The matter has been settled. Now let him go. Where will the honor of our Ministry of Magic go? I have my own arrangements for this matter. You don't need to worry about it. He pulled a chair from the side and placed it opposite Yagus. I advise you to be more honest and cooperate with me, otherwise I won't be able to reap the rewards. Tell me, why are you going to Gringotts at noon today? Go and save people. Yagus replied calmly. From the moment he was brought into the Ministry of Magic, he knew that the other party had found no evidence at all. Otherwise, he would have been sent to the court long ago. Can we still eat and drink here? You're still not honest. Do you really think I don't dare to touch you? Scrimgeour slapped the table, his already gloomy face even more terrifying. If it were an ordinary little wizard, he would probably be really scared by him. But Yagus had experienced countless assassinations as early as his childhood, and this kind of intimidation was just childish. If my guess is correct, the news that I was slandered and arrested by the Ministry of Magic should have spread. If I walked out of the Ministry of Magic with an injury, how do you think the wizards outside would react? Argus's smile was still so gentle, but Scrimgeour had a shuddering feeling. It was as if everything about him was seen through by the young man in front of him. Do you really think I can't deal with you? Scrimgeour's eyes were red. Bring me the Veritaserum. I don't believe that the saints are clean and there is no problem at all. Director. Several Aurors were shocked. Veritaserum, a potion, is only allowed to be used under certain circumstances. In most cases, it will be strictly prohibited. Even if it is used, its confession cannot be used as evidence. Moreover, if the outside world knew that they were abusing Veritaserum, ordinary wizards would be in trouble, but the British pure-blood families would only be in danger. Not many of them are clean. The abuse of Veritaserum is tantamount to touching their bottom line. Director, think twice. Yes, Director, if the wizards outside knew that we used Veritaserum on an 11-year-old child, they would bring down the Ministry of Magic. Shut up, everyone. If anything happens, I will be the one to handle it. I have nothing to do with you. Scrimgeour was groaning and panting, obviously having a fever. He is a person who hates evil and has an extremely stubborn temper. His natural prejudice against the saints made him bent on uprooting them. Another level of the Ministry of Magic. Fudge's office. The originally peaceful floor with few people suddenly flooded in with a large number of well-known wizards. The staff of the Ministry of Magic wanted to stop him, but there were simply not enough manpower. In addition, any of these people who were picked out individually were all slightly famous figures. They are just getting paid to do things, and there is no need to offend anyone to death. Boom. The door to the British Minister of Magic's office was pushed open hard, and Fudge frowned and raised his head. But the next sentence made Fudge completely confused. Minister Fudge, I think you need to give all British wizards an explanation. When did the British Ministry of Magic become a puppet department that only obeys the orders of the goblins of Gringotts? Who I am? Where am I? What happened? Fudge was panicking now. I just approved the documents for a while, why did I suddenly get such a big label? Can anyone tell me what happened? Umbridge, one of the best losers in the Ministry of Magic, stood up and hurriedly handed a series of newspapers that had just been released to Fudge. When Fudge saw it, his eyes suddenly darkened. Scrimgeour, can you please do something? Is this little ancestor something you can catch if you want? Not to mention that the saint's influence has spread in Britain, but the group of purebloods headed by Malfoy behind him is not something that the Ministry of Magic can handle. What's more, he is trying to protect ordinary wizards. The British wizard's saliva will kill people. Fudge held onto the table to steady himself. Everyone, please calm down. This is just a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? What kind of misunderstanding can bring an 11-year-old child into the Ministry of Magic? This group of people were not willing to let Fudge get away with it and make the matter clear directly. If it weren't for the fact that there were many wizards watching at the time, would the British Ministry of Magic still be planning to arrest him in Azkaban? No. I think Scrimgeour just invited him here to ask questions. Once the matter is clarified, he will definitely send Mr. Grindelwald back safely. Fudge's head was pounding and he hurriedly explained. Questioning. Do you need to bring an Auror to escort you? Do you need to threaten other people's lives? Do you think we are all blind? If the British Ministry of Magic doesn't give us a reasonable explanation today, we will go to the International Confederation of Wizards and the Wizengamot. That's right, we don't believe that the British Ministry of Magic can cover up the sky with one hand. Fudge held a handkerchief and kept wiping the sweat on his forehead. Everyone, please believe us, believe the British Ministry of Magic, we will definitely give Mr. Grindelwald justice. Turning around, he scolded Umbridge angrily. Why don't you hurry up and send someone to Scrimgeour to bring Mr. Grindelwald out? Why are you standing there in such a daze? Umbridge felt aggrieved. Mr. Minister, it's not that I don't want to send one, it's that the Ministry of Magic has been surrounded by British wizards. Everyone is trying to maintain order, and no one can be found at all. Idiot, you are not a human being. I ask you if you are a human being. Umbridge, who had just woken up from a dream, hurriedly walked out. Before she could walk out of the door, she saw several figures approaching. How did you come? Arthur Weasley frowned slightly and looked at Lucius next to him. Lucius snorted disdainfully. Do I still need to report to you when I come here? I have business today and I don't have time to argue with you. Arthur glanced at Lucius and walked straight towards Fudge. You say it as if someone is not here for business. Lucius didn't bother him too much and walked into the office with a group of purebloods. Mr. Malfoy. And Parkinson and Mr. Greengrass. Mr. Knott, are you here too? This is. As soon as he saw these people coming, Fudge suddenly had an ominous premonition. When she turned around and saw Arthur and Mrs. Molly, she felt even more determined in her heart. Nothing, we just came to ask how Mr. Grindelwald is doing. Lucius didn't speak as aggressively as the previous group of wizards, but he already made his attitude clear by standing here. Everyone can see that bringing several pure-blood family patriarchs here, it's not possible to just ask. The meaning is obvious, I will give you face now and let's discuss it carefully. If you don't know what's interesting, don't blame me for being rude. The weight of Lucius and others is obviously much heavier than the previous batch of wizards. No matter how famous the previous wizards were, they only represented themselves personally and could not have an impact on Fudge's status. Lucius and the others are different. Any one of them is a big shot in the British wizarding world. If they join forces to mess with Fudge, they can really tear him down from the position of Minister of Magic. Of course it's okay. Mr. Grindelwald was just invited to the Ministry of Magic to ask a few questions. I just wanted to send someone to ask if it was over, but I didn't expect you, Mr. Malfoy, to come first. Fudge didn't have the same coping skills as before. Every move he made seemed extremely enthusiastic. This is the best. Mrs. Molly snorted coldly. She was originally an Auror, and she couldn't stand Scrimgeour's unscrupulous approach to his goals. Even if the other party is the vanguard to capture the Dark Wizard. Minister Fudge, if you don't mind, could you arrange for us to meet Mr. Grindelwald first? At least, we have to make sure of his safety. Lucius was also on Scrimgeour's hunting list and knew this hateful Auror director very well. It has been a while since Yagus was captured, and he had to see it with his own eyes before he could rest assured. Fudge hesitated. Scrimgeour has been staring at Yagus for more than a day or two. Now that he has finally caught him, he is not sure what method he will use. If someone sees it, the Ministry of Magic won't be able to explain. Mr. Malfoy, you also know that the Ministry of Magic cannot come in or out at will. Well, I'll send Umbridge over now and ask her to bring a message to Scrimgeour. Minister Fudge, let me go. Arthur took the initiative to speak and wanted to take over this task. But how dare Fudge? He sent his confidants there just to ensure that there would be a buffer if Yagus was punished. If you go over there, you'll have nothing to do with buffering. Don't pick up your wand and start fooling Scrimgeour. Although Weasley and Malfoy are both members of the Holy 28 clan, they are far apart in terms of status and power. What's more, Arthur is still working under him, and Fudge's attitude towards him is far worse than Lucius. Arthur Weasley, I said, let Umbridge go. When Arthur was about to say something, Lucius spoke first. He was able to bring the Malfoy family to where it is today, and his mind is naturally unparalleled. Fudge's intentions were obvious at a glance. Minister Fudge, I think it would be more appropriate for Mr. Weasley to see it. It's not that I can't trust Ms. Umbridge. You know better than me what kind of person Mr. Scrimgeour is. If an accident happens, I'm afraid Ms. Umbridge won't be able to stop him. On this issue, Fudge did not give in at all. Mr. Malfoy, please trust me and the British Ministry of Magic. At this moment, an angry female voice came. Believe the Ministry of Magic. Do you believe that your fate will be to be imprisoned in the trial room as a dark wizard? Professor McGonagall was like an angry lioness, questioning him before he even entered the door. Everyone followed the sound and saw Dumbledore slowly walking towards Fudge's office. The four heads of Hogwarts gather. There may be many people criticizing Professor McGonagall's past, especially her emotional experience. But it is undeniable that she is a perfect dean and a perfect teacher. When one's students face danger or injustice, they will immediately stand up to protect their students. No matter which college it is. Seeing the bigwigs of Hogwarts gathered together, Fudge could no longer maintain his posture and walked out of the office quickly. Professor Dumbledore, 4 deans, long time no see. You must also be doing it for Minister Fudge. I would like to ask, what crime did my student commit? Does he need to be taken to the Ministry of Magic and imprisoned? Professor McGonagall asked directly without mercy. This. Fudge hesitated, not daring to reply rashly. The 4 Hogwarts professors appeared together, representing the attitude of the entire Hogwarts. If nothing else, more than 80% of the wizards in the UK are from Hogwarts. It is not an exaggeration to call it the cradle of British wizards. Among them, I don't know how many are students of these professors. It's fine if the deans don't show off their power, but once they speak, they will definitely respond. More importantly, in addition to the 4 deans, there is also Dumbledore, the Supreme Emperor of the British Ministry of Magic. His status in the hearts of British wizards is much stronger than that of the Ministry of Magic. Even Fudge's position as Minister of Magic was given up by Dumbledore. In this case, how dare Fudge be careless? This. Professor McGonagall, I have sent someone to check it out. Please wait a moment. Immediately. Connolly. Dumbledore looked serious and interrupted Fudge. You'd better go check out the Ministry Hall. Maybe you will change your mind. Ministry of Magic Hall. Fudge was a little confused. Let's go, just in time. I also want to see how Yagus is doing now. Dumbledore didn't give Fudge any room to relax and took the lead towards the Auror's office. Mrs. Arthur and Mrs. Molly came forward to say hello. With the 2 of them at the beginning, others also stepped forward. Even Lucius had to show some respect to the greatest white wizard of our time. Only then did Dumbledore notice that the people around Fudge's office were all here for Argus. Apart from being shocked, I couldn't help but feel a little afraid. Famous wizards, pure-blood families, and now Hogwarts. Unknowingly, this young man has opened up a huge network of contacts in the British wizarding world. Depending on the Saint's shop and the goodwill this incident brought to the wizarding public, his reputation will definitely rise again. This is extremely detrimental to his future plans and Harry's development. He couldn't help but secretly regret his initial hesitation. Now that Yagus has grown up, it's too late to touch him again. Everyone came all the way to the hall of the Ministry of Magic. The first time Fudge saw the hall, he was shocked by what he saw. He never thought that there would be so many people in the entire Ministry of Magic. Crowds of people. A large group of Aurors and staff were working to maintain order. How is this going? Fudge hurriedly grabbed an Auror and questioned him. His hand unconsciously touched the wand on his waist. He heard Umbridge mention it before, but he didn't care at the time. I thought if there were at most a dozen people, what could happen? It wasn't until he came down that he discovered, there were more than a dozen. There were more than 100 or 200 people. In shock, he wanted to lock himself behind Dumbledore. Lucius and the others had already seen it when they came here and had no reaction. It's not like he came to find me anyway. What do I worry about? The caught Auror was sweating profusely. Minister, the newspapers have already spread it. They say we abused our power and arrested people at will. And, a few newspapers said. Say what? Fudge roared. It is said that we colluded with the goblins of Gringotts and deliberately staged a show just for the property of the Saints group. Veins popped up on Fudge's forehead. Asshole. Which reporter posted this? Rita Skeeter. It's her again. Fudge almost fainted without taking a breath. Looking at the angry crowd, he swallowed and stepped forward. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Fudge, the British Minister of Magic. Please don't be impulsive. If you have any questions, you can tell me. However, all he received in response were curses. In desperation, Fudge had no choice but to turn his attention to the person he least wanted to ask for help. Dumbledore. Dumbledore stepped forward slowly. Quiet. The sound was not loud, but it reached everyone's ears clearly. It's Professor Dumbledore. Is the professor also here to seek justice for Mr. Grindelwald? Stop talking yet, listen to the professor. The crowd gradually became quiet, and everyone's attention turned to Dumbledore and others. I can understand how you feel. As Mr. Grindelwald's principal, I am also very sad that this happened. But please believe me, believe in Hogwarts, and believe in the Ministry of Magic. We will definitely give Mr. Grindelwald justice. That's right. Fudge quickly jumped out to show off his presence. I assure you in the name of the Minister of Magic, please go back first. Fudge thought that with Dumbledore's influence, everyone would be obedient. As a result, no one even moved. This made his face suddenly look a little uneasy. Alas. Dumbledore sighed and spoke again. Everyone, please consider the feelings of the employees of the Ministry of Magic. They also have work to do. If they continue to stay here, it will not only waste their time, but also more people in need of help. We just stay here and don't make trouble. A voice suddenly came from the crowd. Then someone echoed, yes, we just need to take a look at Mr. Grindelwald to make sure he is okay, and then we will go back. Yes. Let's take a look and go back. Just take one look and leave. Dumbledore asked Fudge with his eyes. Fudge thought for a moment and nodded. I'm almost calling Scrimgeour's ancestors apes. Why did you cause such a big trouble, and in the end you ended up hiding in the office and couldn't come out? Let me carry it all. Is this something that humans can do? Suppressing the anger in his heart, Fudge waved his hand and asked most of the Ministry of Magic employees to withdraw from the hall and return to work. The wizards in the hall also abided by the agreement. He didn't ask to enter the Ministry of Magic like before, he just stood there and waited quietly. Everyone walked all the way to the Auror office. Before they entered the door, they saw several Aurors, like a mouse seeing a cat. Rush into the house in a hurry. All fixed. As a double agent, Snape is very sensitive to people's expressions and behaviors. Make a quick decision and immobilize several people. With a wave of the magic wand, the office door suddenly opened. Inside the house, Argus was sitting on the chair, with several Aurors standing around him as if questioning some heinous criminals. He is not allowed to make any moves. Tonks was tightly controlled by the two Aurors and kept struggling. And Scrimgeour was walking towards Argus with a small bottle of unknown potion. Now, even Professor Flitwick, who had always been good-tempered, was angry. Minister Fudge, is this the question you're talking about? Is this what you call safe? Well done, the British Ministry of Magic is so well done. The moment Fudge saw the scene in the house, his mind went blank. It's over, what I was most worried about happened. Scrimgeour actually dared to torture Argus. And he was caught red-handed. I can't even explain it. These people are all Hogwarts teachers, and they can't tolerate a grain of sand in their eyes. How could you allow your students to suffer such injustice? Scrimgeour didn't expect anyone to break in suddenly, and he was stunned for a while. Scrimgeour, what have you done? What exactly is going on? Fudge wanted to bite him to death, gritted his teeth, and squeezed out a sentence from between his teeth. Expelliarmus. Snape noticed something was wrong with the potion in Scrimgeour's hand, and said nothing if he could do it. Scrimgeour was caught off guard and was hit hard. Come quickly. With a wave of his hand, the potion fell steadily into his hand. I opened the bottle cap and took a slight sniff, my face became extremely ugly. What is it, Severus? Dumbledore asked expressionlessly. Veritaserum. Those three words made Fudge's heart completely cold. At this time, not only did the four deans of Hogwarts go berserk, but Lucius and others looked at Scrimgeour with something wrong in their eyes. Minister Fudge, we just found out today that the Ministry of Magic has this thing on hand all year round. The patriarch of the Parkinson family spoke angrily. Mr. Parkinson, please listen to me explain to you. I think it's best for Minister Fudge to explain why he would use this kind of thing on our students. Professor McGonagall said coldly. Me. Fudge didn't know Scrimgeour would use this thing, he didn't even know how to explain it. Such a big scapegoat, let alone him, if word spreads, the entire British Ministry of Magic will be questioned. He and Scrimgeour had never dealt with each other in the first place, and they were already very angry by taking the blame. Professor McGonagall's continuous questioning made him even more angry and helpless. But no one in front of him was easy to offend. Feeling aggrieved, Fudge glared at the surrounding Aurors. Don't all of them have eyes? Let Mr. Grindelwald go quickly. Several Aurors were also frightened and hurriedly stayed away, fearing that they would be implicated. Mrs. Molly quickly stepped forward and held Yagus in her arms to comfort him. Good boy, it's okay, it's okay. There was an imperceptible smile on Yagus's lips. The next second, her eyes turned red, and she hugged Mrs. Molly tightly, as if she had been greatly wronged. Children who cry will get milk. If I don't take this opportunity to make a big deal, wouldn't this trip to the Ministry of Magic be in vain? His actions are hints. It implies that you have been wronged and that you have been treated unfairly. Sure enough, the views of the people around him suddenly changed. Professor McGonagall looked at Dumbledore, who looked at Argus and spoke to Fudge. Connolly, I need an explanation. As the principal of Hogwarts, he has his own bottom line. No matter what, we must maintain the safety of students. The behavior of the British Ministry of Magic has already touched his red line. Fudge took a deep breath. Eyes turned to Scrimgeour. Scrimgeour, tell me who gave you permission to use such a thing on an 11-year-old student. Scrimgeour opened his mouth and was about to speak when he was interrupted by Mrs. Molly. I think it might be better to let Tonks do the talking. What do you think, Minister? The 4 words, Mr. Minister, were spoken very strongly, obviously with a sense of ridicule. Let me go. Tonks broke free from the restraints, moved her wrists a little, and recounted everything that happened after she came to the office. After hearing this, everyone became even more angry. Many grumpy wizards have already taken out their wands. Not allowed to eat, using force to intimidate a young wizard who has just entered school. This is how the British Ministry of Magic works. My eyes were really opened this time. Professor Sprout, the most amiable of the 4 deans, was also trembling with anger at Scrimgeour's behavior. Fingers tightly holding the wand. It seems like he will take action in the next second. Professor McGonagall still retained some sense, stood in front of Professor Sprout, and tugged on her sleeve. Fudge forced a smile and said to Professor Sprout, I'm so sorry, Professor Sprout. The British Ministry of Magic will definitely give Hogwarts a satisfactory answer. But now, we'd better send Mr. Grindelwald to St. Mungo's hospital for a checkup first. If something goes wrong, it's better to treat it in time. That's right. Mrs. Molly also realized this and quickly let go of Yagus to check him. It wasn't until it was confirmed that he was not injured that he breathed a sigh of relief. Just when he was about to send him to St. Mungo's hospital for a closer examination, Umbridge's sweet voice suddenly sounded. Mr. Minister. I don't think it's convenient for Mr. Grindelwald to go out now. Go away. What's wrong with you? Can you afford to delay Mr. Grindelwald's treatment? Fudge was so angry that he could not show favor to Umbridge, so he immediately cursed. Minister, there are many wizards in the hall watching eagerly. If they see Mr. Grindelwald being treated like this, I'm afraid there will be another riot. Hearing the wizards gathering in the hall, Fudge immediately hesitated. Yes, there are so many wizards at the door that cannot be dismissed easily. I promised them to let Yagus come forward, but in this situation, if they really see what Yagus looks like, they will have to overthrow the British Ministry of Magic. At that time, he, as the designated minister, will sit at the end of his seat. How could he accept this? You mean, for the sake of the reputation of your Ministry of Magic, you have to let Argus stay here and wait for death. Mrs. Molly was not polite. She hugged Yagus and rushed out. I want to send Yagus to the hospital now, and I want to see who dares to stop me. Arthur didn't speak, just stood quietly on the other side of Yagus. The attitude is obvious. Anyone who wants to take action must get through me first. Mrs. Molly. Argus suddenly spoke, broke out of Mrs. Molly's arms, and glanced at Lucius. I think it's better for me to go to the Ministry of Magic Hall first to appease the wizards. They have waited too long. If they continue to stay, it will not only waste their own time, but also waste the manpower and material resources of the Ministry of Magic. I wasn't injured anyway, so there's no rush at this moment. Mrs. Molly's expression was complicated. You kid, how old are you, and you still think about others? Do you know that it's because of this that you are bullied? Yagus smiled. It's okay, let Minister Fudge accompany me. Fudge. He can't. Or am I? Minister Fudge represents the Ministry of Magic. Only the two of us together can the wizards outside believe that the impact on the Ministry of Magic will be minimized. I just wonder if Minister Fudge would like to go with me. Yes, of course I do. Fudge was afraid that Yagus would regret it, so he nodded hastily and agreed. In the corner where no one saw, the corner of Yagus's mouth raised an imperceptible arc. The first show is over. Next, get ready to start the second game. The two walked side by side towards the Ministry of Magic Hall. After walking far away and confirming that Dumbledore and others could not hear their conversation, Fudge hesitated to speak. Mr. Grindelwald, please hide it a little bit about the Veritaserum. Once British wizards know that Scrimgeour secretly used this potion, it will cause an immeasurable blow to the reputation of the British Ministry of Magic. As if he was afraid that Yagus would not agree, he hurriedly explained. Don't worry, the British Ministry of Magic will definitely give you a satisfactory answer to this matter. Yagus turned to look at Fudge, with a meaningful smile on his face. Does Secretary Fudge really want to suppress this? What do you mean? Fudge frowned in confusion. Or I should change the question, is Secretary Fudge willing to be a puppet? Before coming to the UK, Argus had a detailed understanding of the British Ministry of Magic. The Ministry of Magic is divided into 7 departments, but these 7 departments are not as harmonious as outsiders imagine. Before becoming the Minister of Magic, Fudge was the director of the Department of Magical Accidents and Disasters. He was very lucky to become the Minister of Magic. If Barty Crouch's son hadn't been a loyal Death Eater, he would never have been given the position of minister. Because of this, there are very few departments he can control in the entire Ministry of Magic. Barty Crouch, Amelia Bones, Rufus Scrimgeour, Piers Thickness. Everyone holds great power, and none of them can be mobilized by Fudge. Barty Crouch is even more capable of competing with him and is always ready to take his place. If not, Fudge wouldn't have been wooing British, pure-blood families all day long to gain their support. Yagus' words are tantamount to tearing off his last fig leaf. Fudge's voice became angry. Mr. Grindelwald, do you know what you are talking about? With just your words, I can. Minister Fudge, there is no need to say these meaningless words. Yagus didn't care and looked directly into his eyes, with a bewitching tone in his tone. If you think about it carefully, if what happened today reaches the ears of British wizards, what will they think of Scrimgeour? But the British Ministry of Magic will also. Ha! Yagus chuckled. What will happen? At most, it will just be a few curses, but can it be cancelled? But if this matter becomes public, it will be a devastating blow to Scrimgeour's reputation. It is not impossible to take him to the trial room. Scrimgeour controls the most important Auror command in the Ministry of Magic. He was removed from his position, and the position of director of the Auror Command was left vacant. Fudge gradually fell into thought. The Auror Command belongs to the Legal Enforcement Department and is Amelia's territory. She has a high reputation in the Ministry of Magic. Even if Scrimgeour is imprisoned, she can temporarily take over the Auror Command. Location. You have already said that the Auror Command is under the Law Enforcement Division. As a subordinate, Scrimgeour has an unshirkable responsibility for doing such a thing. No, although the Auror Command belongs to the Legal Enforcement Department in name, it is actually an almost independent department. It will be difficult to take this opportunity to bring down Amelia. Yagus stopped and looked in the direction of the hall. Minister Fudge, do you think ordinary wizards in Britain would know this? It never matters what the facts are, what matters is what people believe. They only know that Aurors are affiliated with the Legal Enforcement Department. How much do they know about the internal facts? If Amelia chooses to make the inside story public, according to usual practice, she will no longer be able to interfere with the Auror Command. If not, this scapegoat will be enough to make all British wizards question her. No matter what she chooses, she can only watch the Auror Command slip away from her. Isn't it? This time, Fudge was silent. The look he looked at Yagus no longer contained the contempt of a child. Even with a hint of fear. The control of people's hearts, keen judgment of situations, and confidence in strategizing. None of which is possible for an 11-year-old wizard. Even though he had been immersed in the Ministry of Magic for many years, he did not have such a keen sense of smell. After a while, he slowly spoke. What is the purpose of doing this? I don't believe in free help. Yagus had expected this. My father. Your father. Fudge was stunned for a moment, and then he thought of Yagus's identity. Son of Grindelwald. Yes, you should be aware of the relationship between the Saint and Dumbledore. You know better about Dumbledore's influence on you. You want me to help you deal with Dumbledore. Fudge felt that he had grasped the truth, and he was obviously relieved when he spoke. Only when you know the other party's purpose can you be qualified to negotiate. Otherwise, you can only be led by the other party. His existence has hindered too many people. But he's Dumbledore. Fudge was still hesitating. Dumbledore has defeated 2 generations of Dark Lords, and there is no doubt about his strength. Even if he is the Minister of Magic, he would not dare to have a direct conflict with him. Argus turned his head and looked directly into Fudge's eyes. Minister Fudge, are you really willing to be Dumbledore's puppet forever? A puppet minister who looks at everyone's faces and always ignores them when mentioned. Mr. Grindelwald, watch your tone. His face suddenly became extremely ugly. Yagus's words undoubtedly hit his most painful point. Tone. With someone who may abdicate at any time, do you still need to pay attention to your tone? Dumbledore's sweet baby. Yagus's words were extremely sarcastic. Fudge's face turned red at a speed visible to the naked eye. He wanted to refute, but couldn't say anything to refute. He could only stare at Yagus with one eye. Minister Fudge, you don't have to stare at me. You know, I'm telling the truth. If you want me to hide it, pretend that nothing happened, and continue to live in Dumbledore's shadow, I can understand. After all, there is nothing wrong with being a puppet minister. Although it depends on people's faces, it is still much better than ordinary wizards. Oh, by the way, I want you to continue to help look after the store. You can take this opportunity to earn a lot of gold galleons. Anyway, that's all you can do, that's all. Shut up. I tell you to shut up. Fudge was furious. He suddenly took out the wand from his arms and pointed it at Yagus. Argus walked towards Fudge step by step, and did not stop until the wand was pressed against his chest. You only get one chance. Should I choose to continue being your puppet, or take a step forward of my own and truly take control of the Ministry of Magic? Answer me. Fudge's forehead was sweating, his eyes were red, and he was breathing heavily. I am constantly struggling inside. As the Minister of Magic, he ranks second in the UK. Sometimes we have to look at the expressions of our ministers, directors, and even some pure-blood families. He has had enough of this useless life. No. 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 I'm not a puppet. There's no way I can be Dumbledore's marionette. No way. Argus smiled and gently hugged Fudge, who was shaking. Wise choice. Fudge seemed to have lost his strength and fell to the ground. He didn't even notice the wand falling from his hand. Yagus said nothing, just looked at him quietly. Fudge is a kind person on the surface, but actually weak, and he does not have a strong family support behind him. It was not easy for him to break up with Dumbledore. However, he has one biggest weakness. He has a strong desire to control power. As long as you grasp this point, it is not difficult to use him. As for the Auror headquarters, Fudge must have someone to put it in. That's no ordinary department. With just a few losers in Fudge's hands, he still wants to command these Aurors. Dream on. In the end, it is still necessary to select suitable people from Aurors or other department leaders to replace them. At this time, the opportunity to take action comes. Not long after entering the UK, Argus had asked Vita to send people to place people in the Ministry of Magic. Once the key positions were leaked, he would do his best to push them into positions. When Fudge and Amelia fight for the position of director of the Auror headquarters, it will be the time when the Saint Fishermen gain. After about 2 or 3 minutes, Fudge's mood seemed to have adjusted slightly. He stood up and looked at Yagus. Let's go, Mr. Grindelwald. If you continue to delay, the professors at Hogwarts don't know what trouble will happen. It's better to solve it as soon as possible. Yagus leaned forward to caress his chest and said with a smile, as you wish. Ministry of Magic Hall. Even though there was a period of time in the past, many wizards were still abiding by the agreement. Quietly waiting for Yagus' arrival. Only occasionally there will still be some discussion. Why hasn't Mr. Grindelwald come out yet? Nothing really happened, right? Probably not. Didn't you see that all the professors from Hogwarts are here? And Dean Dumbledore. With them here, they can definitely seek justice for Mr. Grindelwald. You are right, Hogwarts will not let Mr. Grindelwald be wronged. Hey, look, Mr. Grindelwald is out. Mr. Grindelwald. Mr. Grindelwald, how are you? Seeing Yagus appear, everyone's tone immediately became concerned. Everyone's eyes were focused on this young man with blonde hair and blue eyes. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your help today. Without you, I don't know how long I would have to wait to regain my freedom. Thank you everyone. Yagus slowly stepped forward, bowed slightly, and bowed deeply to everyone. Mr. Grindelwald, you are too kind. You were taken into the Ministry of Magic to protect us, we can't just sit idly by and watch. That's right. There were echoes from the crowd, obviously not caring about the energy and time spent on this. Yagus took a deep breath, paused briefly, and continued to speak. I think everyone is curious about what I experienced at the Ministry of Magic. To tell you the truth, just now, I was interrogated over and over again and asked to admit my crimes again and again. They even tried to use Veritaserum to get the answers they wanted. Using Veritaserum to force an 11-year-old to speak. His eyes were full of loss. The grievance in his tone made everyone even more angry. They couldn't believe that the Ministry of Magic could be so despicable. For the sake of your own prejudice, treat a child who protects ordinary wizards as a criminal. Everyone turned their attention to Fudge, hoping that he could give a reasonable explanation. But the only response to them was silence. All this was seen by Yagus. They said that I was guilty, saying that I ignored the contract between goblins and wizards and cast a spell on them in public. While in detention, I fell into self-doubt more than once. Did I really do something wrong? Maybe I should choose to be patient. Maybe I should be like them and choose to settle down. Mr. Grindelwald. The somewhat emotional witch's eyes turned red unknowingly. He was obviously upholding justice, but he was slandered as a criminal who violated peace. This grievance and unwillingness are difficult to describe in words. Several wizards quietly clenched their fists. Yagus raised his head and scanned everyone one by one. But at this moment, after I see the bright hope in the eyes of everyone here, I understand. 300 years ago, we were betrayed by the people we knew best, who were our respected leaders. They ignored our dead compatriots and hid the entire wizarding world until today. 200 years ago, we were betrayed by the people we trusted most, who claimed to be our ministers and chairmen. They ended the war between wizards and goblins and handed over the custody of gold galleons to the goblins. Are these people guilty? Who should judge their crimes? If I'm guilty, then my crime is to defend the rights of British wizards. Bang bang bang. The crowd burst into unprecedented applause and cheers. And it's getting worse. Most of the people who came here today are ordinary wizards. Suffering countless oppressions, I have been dissatisfied with the upper echelons of the wizarding world for a long time. Yagus's words undoubtedly awakened the indignation deep in their hearts. That's right. Well said. Why did we shed blood and sacrifice to get this result in the end? Support Mr. Grindelwald. Countless people shouted and boiled. In the end, they all turned into a cry for Yagus. Yagus raised his hand, and the crowd fell silent instantly. Before dawn comes, someone must light up the darkness. The burning flame will bring light to the wizarding world and guide the way forward for newcomers. Our destiny, the destiny of British wizards, will be created by our own hands, and no one will be allowed to control it anymore. Grindelwald. 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 The crowd went wild. Throughout the hall, only Yagus's name was echoing. Looking at the wizards who were so excited that they went crazy, Yagus showed a confident smile on his face. Just when he was about to continue saying something, his peripheral vision suddenly caught sight of several familiar figures standing quietly not far away. Dumbledore, dressed in white robes, stands out. But compared to the excited crowd, Dumbledore looked at Argus with more fear. And complicated. Tonks, on the other hand, looked very excited and waved her little fist. Keep cheering for Yagus. Yagus secretly thought something was wrong. After returning to school this time, life will probably not be so easy. Yagus frowned for a moment, then relaxed. This action was somewhat impulsive. Fortunately, the result is good. What I said tonight will surely spread throughout the UK very quickly. As long as he has the support of British wizards, even if Dumbledore wants to deal with him, he can't do it openly. Compared to Voldemort, Dumbledore's bottom line is still too high. He noticed the four heads of house behind Dumbledore. The expressions of several people are different. Snape remained expressionless, and even had a hint of sarcasm on his lips. Because Professor Flitwick himself had part of the elf bloodline, he was somewhat tangled up in Argus's words and lowered his head helplessly. Professor McGonagall's green pupils revealed an emotion that could not be described in words. She is someone who has experienced the Grindelwald era. As a good friend of Dumbledore, she knows how much effort Dumbledore spent to defeat him. But now, a more remarkable Grindelwald is about to emerge. He is still his best and proudest student. This made her feelings for Yagus extremely complicated. Compared to Professor McGonagall, Professor Sprout is less thoughtful. With a smile on his face. She has no prejudice against Grindelwald, she is just proud of her students. Everyone. Argus turned to the many wizards in the Ministry of Magic. We are not here for violence, all we want is fairness and justice. As he spoke, he glanced at Fudge, hinting that he would express his position. Fudge still felt a little guilty and subconsciously wanted to look back to see what Dumbledore meant. He came to his senses only after hearing two light coughs from Yagus. He spoke to the wizard in the hall. In view of Mr. Scrimgeour, director of Auror Command, abusing his authority, abusing prohibited potions, and imprisoning Mr. Grindelwald without authorization. The Ministry of Magic will temporarily remove Mr. Scrimgeour from his duties pending trial. As soon as these words came out, the crowd burst into applause. Well done. That's how it should be done. The Ministry of Magic finally did something. Hearing everyone's voices, Fudge showed a slight smile on his face. This is the first time since he became the Minister of Magic that he has received support and cheers from a large number of wizards. While feeling secretly happy in my heart, I couldn't help but sigh. Yagus was indeed right. In this way, he can successfully take charge of the Auror headquarters. By then, the control over the Ministry of Magic will skyrocket. As long as he completely controls the Ministry of Magic, will Dumbledore want to control him like before? Dream. Ladies and gentlemen, you have seen Mr. Grindelwald, please come back first. It won't be long before Mr. Grindelwald can go back to school and continue his classes. Fudge did not forget about business and hurriedly advised everyone. The wizards looked at Yagus with hesitation in their eyes. Minister Fudge is right, people in the Ministry of Magic also have to work. For just me, so much manpower and material resources have been spent, but the ones who suffer are ordinary wizards like us who need the help of the Ministry of Magic. Thank you for your help today. I will tell you the follow-up news through the Saints shop in Diagon Alley and the newspaper. Everyone, please come back. With Yagus's guarantee, everyone finally ended the operation. Use various ways to exit the lobby. Many people also came forward to specifically ask about Yagus's specific situation, or left their names, hoping to leave a good impression on Yagus. The Saints are now in full swing in the UK. Many people are trying to join the Saints but they are unable to get in. Now that they finally have the opportunity to talk to the leaders of the Saints, how could they let it go? Yagus knew what these people were thinking and was willing to win them over with a few words. He nodded and smiled at those who came to greet him. On the contrary, Fudge, as the Minister of Magic, stood aside with no one paying attention, looking a little embarrassed. He didn't relax until everyone left. A group of wizards headed by Dumbledore slowly came to Argus. Mrs. Molly came to Yagus and looked carefully. Good boy, thank you for your hard work. Obviously it was Scrimgeour who locked you up, but in the end he asked you to finish it off for him. I'll accompany you to St. Mungo's hospital first, and we'll talk about other things when we get back. Sensing what Fudge wanted to say, he directly stopped him. Yagus felt a little helpless. But it couldn't resist Mrs. Molly's persistence. He nodded and agreed. After thanking everyone who came, he followed Mrs. Molly and left. After Argus left, everyone who had achieved their goal also came to open the Ministry of Magic. Only Dumbledore stayed and came to his office with Fudge, preparing to discuss Scrimgeour's trial with Minister of Magic Fudge in advance. Now that he is the chief wizard of the Wizengamot, high-level officials from the Ministry of Magic like Scrimgeour must come forward to judge. His feelings towards Scrimgeour cannot be said to be very good, but he also knows that Scrimgeour hates him as much as he hates him. When fighting against Voldemort in the future, this kind of person will definitely become the vanguard. But there was really no room for argument about the crimes committed by the other party, so we had to discuss it with Fudge. See if you can get a lighter sentence. At least, he could get out of Azkaban before Voldemort was resurrected. Connolly, what do you think about Scrimgeour? Dumbledore sat on the chair, with a hint of exhaustion in his old eyes. What he did was seen by too many people, and the wizards who were at the Ministry of Magic just now also know about it. I can't control it. Fudge also thought that Dumbledore was looking for an excuse to let Scrimgeour escape punishment and make the matter clear directly. I know, but you also know how badly Scrimgeour has dealt a blow to dark wizards over the years. Maybe we should give him a chance. Dumbledore also felt a headache from this. If only a few of them knew about it, he would still be qualified to negotiate with Yagus. It is not impossible to offer some conditions so that the other party will no longer pursue the case. But now, Scrimgeour's matter is no different from being public. No newspapers needed. Tomorrow morning all wizards in Britain would know that he wanted to administer Veritaserum to an 11-year-old wizard. Defending him at this time is tantamount to fighting against all British wizards. Even so, Dumbledore still has room for maneuver. After all, Scrimgeour has captured dark wizards over the years for all to see. Coupled with Dumbledore's own guarantee, even if the punishment cannot be avoided, it can be reduced to the greatest extent. The most important thing is the British pure-blood family. Many of them have good relations with Argus and occupy important seats in the Wizengamot. Scrimgeour's behavior violated their red line again. If they had the opportunity to kill him now, how could they let it go? Therefore, his only hope is Fudge. If Fudge can reduce the level of the accusation, he will make some omissions in the evidence. Scrimgeour might be able to come out early. But what Fudge said next shocked him. Professor Dumbledore, please forgive me for my helplessness in this matter. Dumbledore had a look of surprise in his eyes. It seemed that he didn't expect Fudge to refuse directly. In the past, although Fudge sometimes disagreed with him, he never chose to have a head-on collision with him. Even in most cases, you will choose to compromise. But today, Dumbledore's eyes changed and he looked deeply at Fudge. I understand, Connolly. After getting the answer, Dumbledore didn't bother anymore. He left the Ministry of Magic directly, returned to the principal's office, and lay on the rocking chair that belonged to him. He recalled the information about Fudge during this period in his mind. Before today, he had not heard anything happened around Fudge. The only thing that can be called a change is Yagus. But Argus only interacted with Fudge for a moment. Even Dumbledore found it hard to believe that Fudge's attitude could change so much in such a short period of time. Is it really you, Argus? Just a few minutes can have such a big impact on Connolly. As expected of your heir. Gale. After Argus was examined at St. Mungo's hospital, he was returned to the manor by Mrs. Molly. Vita got the news shortly after Argus walked out of the Ministry of Magic, and was waiting at the door. Seeing Yagus coming back, the worry in his eyes slowly lifted. He took 2 quick steps to greet him. Agus, are you okay? I'm fine, Aunt Vita. Argus shook his head and looked at Arthur and Mrs. Molly beside him. Aunt Vita, these two are Mr. Arthur Weasley and Mrs. Molly. It was St. Mungo's hospital where they sent me. Thank you for your help. Vita smiled and nodded to the two of them. Ms. Rosier, you are too kind. Arthur had great respect for the legendary figure Vita Rosier, but Mrs. Molly had no scruples. He took Vita and told him a lot about Yagus. This made Arthur a little embarrassed. Thank you, I'll pay attention. Vita did not show any impatience and nodded slightly seriously. Since Mr. Grindelwald has been delivered, we will take our leave first. Arthur was still a little stressed when facing Vita, and his words were a little more reserved. It wasn't until the two left that Vita slowly spoke. That Weasley boy is pretty good. If I remember correctly, his wife should be the sister of the Pruitt brothers. Brothers Pruitt. Yagus had no impression of these two men. There is very little description of Mrs. Molly's past in the original book, except that she was once an elite Auror, and there are only a few words about the rest. These two people were the original members of the Order of the Phoenix. They were besieged and killed by Death Eaters during the First Wizarding War. The strength is good. Vita explained calmly. Yagus raised his eyebrows. He knew the reason for Vita's investigation without asking. Do you need to say the 3 words Order of the Phoenix? In these years of getting along with Vita, Yagus has noticed more than once that although the other person seems to have put aside what happened back then, in reality there is always a hurdle in his heart. Extremely concerned about Dumbledore and his Order of the Phoenix. The information on the 2 initial members is probably memorized by heart. Aunt Vita, nothing happened to the Saints after I was taken away, right? Argus was not interested in Mrs. Molly's past and asked about the Saint instead. No, after you were taken away, I left a few people to continue arranging today's activities. I summoned most of them to prevent anyone from taking the opportunity to cause trouble. Originally, I wanted to go to the Ministry of Magic in person, but the Malfoy boy has been secretly sending people to deliver the news. But I guess he didn't expect Scrimgeour to be so bold as to want to use Veritaserum. Speaking of this, Vita felt scared for a while. This time it was Veritaserum. Even if he drank it, it would only cause a lot of trouble and would not cause any harm to Yagus. But what about next time? Who can guarantee whether Yagus will be fed some deadly potion? I made a mistake in this matter. I only thought that he would use some method to force me to speak, but I didn't expect that they would be so bottomless. Yagus's back also felt slightly cold. He had calculated everything, but he never expected that Scrimgeour would be so tough. It's a bit like a scholar encountering a soldier, and it feels unexplainable. Fortunately, you and Lucius acted quickly, otherwise the consequences would be disastrous. Aunt Vita, remember to send someone to prepare a gift for the wizard who comes to help. There are many ordinary wizards from the British wizarding community coming today. We can't contact them. Let's wait until tomorrow to carry out some activities in the store. It can be regarded as a favor from our Saints group. The gifts from the 4 deans of Hogwarts and Dumbledore were prepared by me personally. As for Weasley, Argus had a slight headache when he mentioned the gifts from Arthur and Mrs. Molly. With their personalities, they would definitely not ask for gifts. But if you don't give it, everyone else will have gifts, except the Weasley family, and many people will talk about it. Forget it, I'll pay a visit to the Burrow in person tomorrow. As for gifts, just prepare some household items. How are the sales in the store today? Very good. When mentioning this matter, Vita's tone revealed unconcealable satisfaction. The look in Yagus's eyes was even more exciting. In just one day, I made nearly 10,000 gold galleons. In the past, this was our monthly income. If Gringotts hadn't caused such a big incident at noon, today's profit would have at least doubled. 10,000 pieces is quite a lot. Yagus nodded, indicating that this amount was acceptable. What's going on over there at Gringotts? Vita sneered. Pretend to be dead. What will happen? It's a pity that the British wizards are very hostile to them because of what happened at noon. Many wizards have taken out the gold galleons they stored there. No matter how much the goblin tried to persuade them, it was useless. If they got a little agitated, the wizard would just say, "Goblin, are you going to launch a 3rd rebellion?" They were so scared that they didn't dare to say anything. Yagus frowned. There is no movement from the pure blood family. Their property is not comparable to that of ordinary wizards, and it will not be transferred for a while. Vita explained softly. Makes sense. After the two briefly discussed the gifts and subsequent activities at the Saints store, Yagus finally returned to his room. A long-lost feeling of exhaustion came over me. He hugged the pillow and fell asleep. The next morning, Argus knocked on the door of the burrow with some gifts. A handsome figure with red wolf tail hair appeared. Are you Mr. Grindelwald? Dad, Mom, Mr. Grindelwald is here. The man with red wolf-tail hair hurriedly opened the door to let Yagus in, and shouted towards the door. "Hello, Mr. Grindelwald, William Arthur Weasley, the eldest son of the Weasley family, just call me Bill." Bill took the initiative and reached out to Yagus. Yagus put down the gift in his hand, gently held Bill's hand, and bowed. "Argus Grindelwald, nice to meet you, Mr. Weasley." There was a rush of footsteps on the stairs inside the house. Mrs. Molly came up and hugged Yagus. "Good boy, welcome to the burrow." Arthur also smiled and expressed welcome. He has a day off today, so he will stay at home. "I originally thought about going to the backyard to tinker with items from the Muggle world, but I didn't expect Argus to come over." Yagus acted very politely and said slightly apologetically, "I didn't tell you in advance, so I apologize for interrupting." "What are you talking about, Argus? Come in and sit down. You came just in time, I just made cookies this morning, come and try them." Mrs. Molly enthusiastically pulled Yagus to sit down, brought a large bowl of biscuits from a table not far away and placed it in front of Yagus. Yagus took a brief look at the environment of the burrow. The interior of the house has been casted with a traceless extension spell, so the space is not too small. There are just a lot of sundries placed, and the dining room, kitchen, and living room are all placed at one end, making it look a bit messy and crowded. Perhaps because of its age, the house overall looks very dilapidated, but there is no trace of mess. Apparently it was because Mrs. Molly kept cleaning. Yagus picked up a cookie in front of him and put it into his mouth. A milky aroma overflows from the mouth, and it is full of ingredients. "It's delicious, I like it very much. Just like it." Mrs. Molly smiled happily. "I'll put some on for you so you can take it with you when you go back to school." "Thank you then." Yagus did not refuse Mrs. Molly's kindness. He could tell that Mrs. Molly's words were not polite, but she was sincerely happy that he liked her biscuits. The behavior like Ron's behavior on the train, which made him feel inferior because he brought his own snacks, is something only a child would do. When Mrs. Molly heard the answer, she got up and walked to the kitchen to prepare biscuits for Argus. Arthur sat next to Argus, and with one word, he attracted Mrs. Molly's attention. "Argus, how's it going at the Ministry of Magic? I'm not giving you a hard time, am I?" "No, last night's incident was so big that they probably don't dare to embarrass me again." "I guess so. When I get to work, I'll ask you about the Ministry of Magic's attitude." Arthur patted Argus on the shoulder in comfort. Boom. At this moment, an explosion suddenly came from the backyard of the burrow. Yagus subconsciously pulled out his wand and was about to do something when he turned around and saw an embarrassed smile on Arthur's face and an angry expression on Mrs. Molly's face. "Arthur, how many times have I told you? If you want to get these Muggle items, go outside, not at home." "Molly, there is a child." Arthur pleaded softly with a pleading look on his face. Mrs. Molly glared at him fiercely, but still gave him some face, and said nothing more. Arthur smiled apologetically at Yagus. "Sorry, I made you laugh." Yagus smiled slightly and couldn't help but sigh in his heart. No wonder George and Fred love to experiment at home. It turns out there is a dad who serves as a role model. Suddenly, he thought of the flying car that Arthur studied in the original work. According to the timeline, the time Ron and Harry left by car was the start of the next semester. In other words, Arthur has now researched this car. This is great stuff. If it can be approved for mass production by the Ministry of Magic, it may become a strong competitor to flying broomsticks. "Uncle Arthur, I have always been interested in items from the Muggle world. If you don't mind, could you take me to see your collection?" "Really?" Arthur's eyes lit up. In the wizarding world, Muggle items have always been despised, which is one of the important reasons why he is despised by pure-blood families. Now, finally someone with the same hobbies as him appeared, how could he not be excited? "Of course it's true. I just don't know if Uncle Arthur agrees." "Agree, of course I agree." Arthur was afraid that Yagus would regret it, so he pulled him towards the shed in the backyard. It is said to be a backyard, but in fact it is no different from the wilderness. The garden had trees growing around the base of the walls, overgrown weeds and overgrown turf, and a large pond. Like many wizards' back gardens, goblins often appear in it. "Stay away, little ones." Arthur stepped carefully, for fear of stepping on them. Arriving near a dilapidated shed not far away, Arthur opened the door excitedly. Let me introduce to you, this is the flying car that took me a long time to build. Yagus looked carefully at the old fort in front of him. From the outside, it looks no different from an ordinary car. But Yagus could feel that there was a lot of magic in it. Would you like to come up and give it a try? I'll take you for a ride. Arthur saw that Yagus was indeed interested and took the initiative to speak. Yagus hesitated. Do you have a driver's license? Driver's license? What is that? Really? I knew that wizards would never do anything like this in the Muggle world. Illegal modification and no driver's license. If something happens in the sky, I won't even have a chance to come down. Thinking of Ron's terrifying driving skills, Yagus's hair instantly stood up. Quickly change the subject. Uncle Arthur, I want to know where exactly the magic should be applied to the car for this kind of modification. This is complicated to say. I originally wanted to use a levitating spell on the entire car, but I found that even if I used this spell, I couldn't control it. It will only float the car. If you want to control its floating ability, you need to disassemble the internal parts. I have to say that Muggles have really good imaginations. When this issue was mentioned, Arthur's interest suddenly rose and he pulled Yagus to chat non-stop. I still have notes about the modification of this car. If you want, I can look it up for you. Of course. Thank you, Uncle Arthur. Yagus was surprised and happy. This note is not something that ordinary people can make. According to this note, Yagus can completely explore Arthur's ideas and invent more Muggle items combined with magic. When the time comes, let Fudge walk and have some fun with the Pure Blood family. Guaranteed to make a fortune. It's a trivial matter. Not many wizards like the Muggle world. Ha ha ha. Arthur seemed very happy to have found a like-minded friend. He rummaged in the shed for a long time and found a dusty notebook and handed it to Yagus. That's it. I have a lot of ideas in it. At this moment, an angry voice came. Arthur, you are not allowed to teach bad children. Under the instruction of Mrs. Molly, Arthur reluctantly promised not to teach these things to Argus. Yagus wanted to explain, but Mrs. Molly above didn't care about it. I just thought Argus was excusing Arthur. In this regard, Yagus could only smile helplessly. After having lunch at the burrow, Argus headed to Diagon Alley using the fireplace and flow powder here. Mr. Grindelwald. You are Mr. Grindelwald. As soon as he came out of the fireplace of the leaky cauldron, people in the bar surrounded Argus. This scene is somewhat similar to when Harry Potter first came here. But crazier than Harry Potter. The excited crowd simply regarded Yagus as their idol, and came over to hug and shake hands with him one after another. Mr. Grindelwald, we saw the news about you in the Daily Prophet today. Thank you for your help to us ordinary wizards. There are not many purebloods with a conscience like you now. Yes, Mr. Grindelwald, we will all remember your kindness to us. Mr. Grindelwald, we support you. Quote. Thank you everyone. It was torture for Yagus to feel welcomed for the first time. What was originally a 1-minute journey ended up taking more than half an hour. Don't show any impatience during this period. Many people held it once and it was not enough, so they had to do it a second time. Yagus even saw the same face appear in front of him 4 times. If he hadn't warned him, that person might come again. Go all the way to the entrance of the leaky cauldron in Diagon Alley. Yagus recalled Hagrid's actions in the original novel. Count 3 pieces on top of the trash can, and 2 pieces on the side. As he knocked, the walls made of stone bricks slowly separated. The most prosperous alley in the British wizarding world appeared in front of Yagus. Speaking of which, this is the first time I've come to Diagon Alley in this way. In the past, I just apparated here. As soon as he walked into Diagon Alley, Yagus was once again surrounded by enthusiastic wizards as expected. Now he has almost become the perfect pure blood in the eyes of ordinary British wizards. Strong, personable, polite and caring to others. The most important thing is to treat ordinary wizards equally and be willing to think about problems from their perspective. I don't know how many British wizard parents keep urging their children to become respectable people like Mr. Grindelwald. Poor Argus has become the public enemy of countless young wizards before he graduates from Hogwarts. He came to the Saint's shop and prepared gifts for several Hogwarts professors in the warehouse. After saying goodbye to Aunt Vita, Argus came to Hogsmeade alone. Pass through the Marauder's map passage that you walked through before, and quietly return to the Slytherin Lounge in Hogwarts. Because it was Christmas, most students chose to go home for the holiday. The few people who were there were all on campus or in the library, so Yaggis's return did not attract anyone's attention. After briefly tidying up the dormitory, Yaggis waved his magic wand and put the gifts he brought in his pocket with a shrinking spell, intending to express his gratitude to several professors in the name of Christmas gifts. The professors at Hogwarts are all good people, except for Snape, who is slightly controversial. If you give gifts directly out of gratitude, they will definitely not accept them. Christmas is the best excuse. He first came to Professor Flitwick's office. His humorous style and relaxed management make this Ravenclaw elf professor very popular among students. In terms of strength, there is also no doubt. When he was young, he won the duel competition championship. Although he was knocked unconscious by Snape in the tower battle, it was also because of a sneak attack. Professor Flitwick was very happy to see Yaggis arriving. Especially when he saw the wine in Yaggis's hand, his eyes lit up. As a frequent visitor to the Three Broomsticks bar, his love for wine is as much as Hagrid's. It's just that his self-control ability is much better than Hagrid's. Professor Flitwick, Merry Christmas. I hope my gift isn't too late. It's rare to still remember Christmas gifts when you encounter something like this. Ha ha ha. Professor Flitwick smiled broadly and took out a notebook from the drawer. This is a notebook I took when I was young. It contains a lot of my combat experience. It should be helpful to you. Thank you, Professor. Yaggis accepted it generously without any delay, and was greeted by Flyvy's hearty laughter again. After chatting with Professor Flitwick for a while, he sent 2 gifts to Professor Sprout and Professor McGonagall. What Sprout teaches is a mixture of dragon manure, which is a rare thing in the wizarding world. Even some dragon farms rarely risk their lives to collect dragon dung. With this ability, anything you can make is worth more than dragon dung. Argus had hesitated for a long time about Professor McGonagall's gift. Do older cat girls prefer Quidditch or cats? This is a difficult question. Finally, after learning about Professor McGonagall's past, Argus decided to give her a lot of precious flower seeds. Looking at Professor McGonagall's complicated eyes, Yaggis didn't say anything and chose to leave politely. The most difficult one. Well, as soon as he reached the door of Snape's office, Argus couldn't help but sigh. Boom, boom, boom. Knocking on the door, Snape's deep voice came from inside. Come in. Seeing Yaggis, there was a hint of surprise on his face, which then turned into a deep mockery. It seems that Mr. Grindelwald does go out at night a lot. He can sneak into Hogwarts by himself before school starts. Yaggis's smile suddenly froze. I didn't know what to say for a while. If you come here just to stand there like a piece of wood, I recommend you go to the Forbidden Forest. There are many similar people there. Seeing that Argus didn't speak, Snape said impatiently. Professor, I'm here to give you a Christmas gift. Merry Christmas. Argus said, placing the things he had prepared in advance on Snape's table. No. Snape refused without even looking. If you really have nothing to do, go and deal with the potion ingredients. A big bucket of slugs was just delivered over there. The moment his peripheral vision glanced at the table, Snape could no longer look away. Tremblingly, he reached out his hand and picked up the photo on the table. The photo is of a little girl. A little girl with dark red hair stood in front of a shop with a bright smile. The photos are not the kind of movable images in the wizarding world, but just ordinary photos in the Muggle world. Snape's eyes were gentler than Argus had ever seen before. I stroked the photo over and over again, wanting to use more force but afraid of hurting the person in the photo. After a while, he spoke in a slightly hoarse voice. Where did it come from? In the Muggle world, in a photo studio. When she was a child, she went there once to take a photo, and the boss used it as a sample for exhibition. Any more? This is the last one. Sensing the change in Snape's mood, Argus said nothing more and planned to leave in silence. Just as he was about to walk out of the door, Snape's cold voice suddenly came from behind. Don't do anything like what happened in the Ministry of Magic Hall last night again. No one wants to see a second Grindelwald rise. Argus wanted to give Dumbledore a gift as well. Nay, he didn't know the password to the principal's office, so he could only put the gift at the door temporarily and wait for Dumbledore to see him take it. After doing this, it was evening. The Hogwarts hall was sparsely occupied by a few people who had come to eat. When Harry saw Argus walking in, he hesitated for a moment, then said hello to him. After all, Argus was also the first friend of his own age that he met in the wizarding world. Even if his best friend didn't like him, Harry still wanted to let the two of them get along as peacefully as possible. His character is very flawed. Due to family reasons, he has cowardice and inferiority in his heart. According to Dumbledore's original idea, he wanted to take advantage of some limelight opportunities during his time at Hogwarts to build his confidence step by step. Unfortunately, the appearance of Yagus made everything come to nothing. Without Hermione's advice and help, the jealousy and inferiority complex in Ron's character were also exposed. The combination of the two makes the cowardice in Harry's character more and more obvious. Completely different from the original. Argus, I saw from the newspaper that you were arrested and sent to the Ministry of Magic. Are you okay now? Thank you for your concern, I'm fine. Yagus did not show any enthusiasm and responded politely. Hey, George, look, here comes our hero. The Weasley twins were eating, and when they saw Argus coming, they greeted him with a smile. You came just in time. Mrs. Molly gave me a lot of cookies. I will send you some later. Spare us. George begged for mercy. We don't know how much we've eaten over the years, so you should keep it. Hearing the voices of Argus and Weasley, the few remaining students in Hogwarts came over. Everyone was concerned about Yagus' situation. Because of the small number of people, even if everyone sat at the long Gryffindor table, there was still a large blank space. Evil Slytherin. He must have used some shady means to escape from the Ministry of Magic. Ron was indignant and took a hard bite of the chicken leg in his hand. Harry frowned slightly and explained for Argus, didn't you see in the newspaper that Professor Dumbledore and the 4 deans have all come forward? There is also a large group of ordinary wizards who are also speaking for Argus. TCH. These people were all deceived by his appearance. Ron continued to be tough. The eyes looking at Yagus were filled with jealousy. After eating, Yagus returned to the dormitory. Take out the notes that Arthur Weasley gave him. Although he didn't plan to spend too much energy on this aspect, it didn't hurt to have a brief understanding. Some of the fantastic ideas in it may bring him some other inspirations. Suddenly, a flame ignited in midair. Then, a big red bird appeared in front of him. Fox. Did Professor Dumbledore ask you to come here? Yagus got up from the bed, took out a few biscuits and handed them to Fox's mouth. Fox raised his head high and seemed to be dismissive of this. He dropped a piece of paper and disappeared before Yagus's eyes. Picking up the note, there was only one sentence written on it. Mr. Grindelwald, please come to the principal's office. The password is cockroach pile. What's going to happen to me? It can't be that you specially asked me to make a trip to thank you for the Christmas gifts, right? Yagus said, but did not stop. He packed up a little and prepared to walk towards the principal's office. Halfway through the walk, he suddenly thought of something, turned around and dug out some things in his bag before officially setting off. Come to the principal's office. Dumbledore was sitting in a chair, enjoying the combination of cockroaches and milk. Mr. Grindelwald, thank you for your woolen socks and candy. I like them very much. Would you like a cockroach pile for dessert? Familiar inquiry. Yagus shook his head in refusal. Principal Dumbledore, I haven't finished reading the book yet. If you have anything to say, please tell me. Agus. I can call you that. Sometimes, pushing yourself too hard may not be a good thing. Dumbledore sighed. A flash of recollection flashed in his eyes. Back then, I once taught a student. He was as talented as you, worked as hard as you, and was loved by all the professors. Unfortunately. Please forgive the nagging of an old man. When people get older, they always like to recall some past events. Is this starting to hit me? Comparing Voldemort to me. Yagus sneered in his heart. I had already anticipated the scene before me. I just didn't expect that the other party would be so impatient. Fortunately, Dumbledore seemed to still be hesitant. With the case of Voldemort back then, he seemed to be more tolerant of himself. That's good, you can have more time to plan. With a polite smile on his face, he directly took out the weapon to deal with Dumbledore. You are very similar to my father. He also likes to recall old friends and past events. It's a pity that the person in his memory never seems to come to see him. Dumbledore's smile faltered. His eyes were filled with sadness. I opened my mouth several times to say something, but when the words reached my lips, I swallowed them back. After a while, he spoke again. But he chose to change the topic. Yagos, I need your help with something. What is it? It can't be Scrimgeour, can it? Dumbledore shook his head. No one can save him from the mistakes he made. I believe you as a ghost. Not long after Dumbledore left, Fudge sent a message to Argus. He told him exactly what Dumbledore meant. Yagus immediately asked Fudge to publish everything in the Daily Prophet early the next morning. In this way, if Dumbledore wants to operate again, he will be the enemy of all British wizards. How could a positive person like him do this? What do you think about Professor Quirrell? Professor Quirrell is a very good teacher. Yagus pretended to be dumbfounded. Really? Dumbledore looked at him with a half smile. If we talk about black magic alone, there are really few people in the wizarding world who can compare with him. You have been in his office for so long, you should know it very well. You can also detect some things. Argus was not surprised that Dumbledore knew about his visit to Quirrell's office. He had no intention of hiding it, so he simply took this opportunity to be honest with Dumbledore. You mean, Voldemort? Dumbledore was slightly startled, then smiled and said, there are not many young wizards who have the courage to call him by his name. Since you can call him by name, you must have met him. Yagus did not refute and nodded silently. 11 years ago, Professor Trelawney made a prophecy. The one who will destroy the Dark Lord is near, born into a family that has defeated him 3 times, born at the end of the 7th month. The Dark Lord will mark him as his great enemy, but he will have powers that the Dark Lord does not have. And one of them must die at the hands of the other because when one survives the other cannot survive. The one who has the power to destroy the Dark Lord people with head strength are born at the end of July. This person is Harry. That's right. That's why I want to provide him with necessary guidance at some point. Dumbledore observed Argus's expression, trying to read his thoughts. However, Argus had been practicing in this area, so Dumbledore couldn't see any clues and could only continue. Mere guidance is not enough for him, he also needs the courage to fight against Voldemort. The current remnant soul is his best training. Professor Dumbledore, I have no intention of becoming a nanny. Argus interrupted Dumbledore. Dumbledore had expected this and spoke slowly. Yagos, we have an agreement. The agreement only requires me to guide Harry, not to let me, an 11-year-old wizard, fight against Voldemort. Dumbledore sighed. In that case, Yagus, what do you think if we make another deal? Yagus scoffed. Professor, I don't think anything is more important than my life. That's Voldemort. Even if it's just a remnant, it's not something I can handle. Hearing Argus's words, Dumbledore's heart suddenly went cold. The most fearful thing when talking about business is this kind of person who refuses to open his mouth. As long as you make an offer, we can negotiate no matter how high the price is. But you are not even willing to pay the price, so what are you talking about? Argus, who has read the original work, knows exactly what Dumbledore wants to do. It was just that he felt that he was not in Hogwarts when Harry was facing off against Voldemort, and wanted to find someone to keep an eye on Harry and give him some protection. Just in case something does go wrong with Harry. But what good does this kind of thing do to yourself? Dumbledore simply didn't have a price worth his heart. Philosopher's Stone. Forget it. If he hadn't read the original work, he might still be tempted, but he already knew what Nicolimé was like. The bones are so brittle that they will break if blown by the wind. What is the use of this kind of immortality? The others are Dumbledore's magical knowledge and the Order of the Phoenix. Magic is something that, with Yagus's current level, anyone can learn from. Which professor can't teach primary school students knowledge? Unless they reach a certain level themselves. But it will take at least a few years, and it is not certain whether Dumbledore will be alive by then. Not to mention the Order of the Phoenix, Dumbledore dared to give it, but Argus might not even dare to accept it. Sirius, Lupin, Snape, which one is not Harry's direct descendant? No matter how strong you are, if you can't command yourself, you are just an empty frame. After thinking about this, Yagus smiled even more contemptuously. Professor Dumbledore, if there is nothing else, I will take my leave first. As for protecting Harry, I think several professors are more suitable than me. Professor Snape is quite good. He should be happy to go. Yagos, I think we can discuss this again. That's not necessary, Professor Dumbledore. Argus stood up to say goodbye, not giving Dumbledore any chance to stay. Dumbledore was left alone in the messy office. On the wall of the office, several principals silently watched what had just happened. Albus, this kid is right. You were really a little too anxious for him to face this as an 11-year-old child. A black-robed witch wearing a pointed hat spoke for Yagus. An old man with a goatee nodded and agreed. That's right, the Grindelwald family is really lucky. The talents of 2 consecutive generations are so good that it is enviable. Come on. Black. And Elizabeth Burke. As long as they are pure blood, you like them all. A blonde-haired round-faced witch was very dissatisfied with the 2 people's remarks, and turned to Dumbledore again. However, Albus, they are right about one thing. It is indeed difficult for an 11-year-old child to deal with such a powerful enemy. Dumbledore reclined in the rocking chair. Every time he felt upset, he would try to find a moment of peace here. I know this child's talent and strength very well. With Fawkes and the spell on Harry, nothing will happen to him. But did you notice his eyes? Armando Dippet, Dumbledore's former headmaster, said seriously. I once saw the same look in another student's face. That's ambition. After Dumbledore thought for a moment, he said slowly, Principal Dippet, we have already missed it once, and I don't want to make it a second time. He is different from Voldemort. He understands the meaning of love better than Voldemort. Dippet didn't speak any more, but the blonde round-faced witch asked another question. Albus, if Mr. Grindelwald is not willing to help, are there any other alternatives? Don't Mr. Potter have many friends? Dumbledore subconsciously flashed Ron's face in his mind, and then shook his head. Forget it, I'll let Fawkes pay more attention to it. With Fawkes here, you can bring me back at any time. Having said that, Dumbledore knew that letting Fawkes bring him here was a helpless choice. After observing Harry during this period, he clearly noticed that what Harry lacked most now was self-confidence. And the courage to fight against Voldemort. This confrontation with Voldemort is a good opportunity. If used well, it can greatly improve Harry's character and gain him a lot of reputation. But if you take action yourself, the nature is completely different. Maybe when Harry encounters difficulties in the future, he will subconsciously seek help from himself or others. He is already old, and Harry needs to walk the road ahead by himself. If he wanted to help him in everything, how could he fight against Voldemort in the future? It's a pity that now he has no other choice. Taking action himself would at least ensure that Harry would not be harmed. It's better than losing your life. Time flies, and soon the day of returning to school comes. Through observation over the past few days, Yagus discovered that Quirrell rarely appeared in public. I saw it a few times occasionally, also in restaurants. And his weakness can be clearly seen. What's more important is that the way the other party looks at me has a hint of greed. The moment the vacation ended, a long-lost system prompt came to my mind. Congratulations to the host for occupying more than half of the transactions in Diagon Alley and obtaining the achievement, The Rise of the Business Giant. Achievement point reward, 100. I almost forgot that I have a system. Yagus smiled bitterly. During this period of time, his life was simply not too fulfilling. He wished he could spend 48 hours a day. I don't have time to think about the system at all. Everyone who returned was not as excited as they imagined. Christmas is over and the final exams will soon come. This is a headache for most little wizards. The Slytherins returned to the lounge and saw Argus reading a book. Everyone who was a little sad just now immediately became energetic, surrounded Yagus, and kept asking him about the news in the Daily Prophet. After briefly responding to a few people, Yagus lost interest. After telling Draco the whole story, he was ready to go to Hagrid to ask about the goods. The Saints' inventory was mostly emptied over one Christmas, and now they are in urgent need of replenishing supplies. Hagrid, are you there? Yagus knocked on the door of Hagrid's hut, and there was a ping-pong-pong sound immediately. It seemed like something had fallen over and smashed. Then came Hagrid's slightly anxious voice. Wait a minute, I'll come and open the door right away. Squeak. The small wooden door opened, and Hagrid relaxed instantly when he saw it was Yagus. It turned out to be you. I was shocked. By the way, Hagrid, I brought you a gift. Yagus shook the wine bottle in his hand. At Hogwarts, there are many teachers who like wine. Even the most serious Professor McGonagall will often go to the Three Broomsticks bar for a drink. Not to mention the alcoholic Hagrid. Seeing the wine, Hagrid was obviously hesitant. He looked around the room and then at Yagus. Come in first, Yagus. As soon as he entered the door, Yagus felt an unconcealable feeling of heat. Even though it is winter now, the temperature inside the house is surprisingly high. It seems that my good teacher is still going the same old way. The price of a Norwegian Spinosaurus egg is not cheap. Quirrell's wallet will be drained. No wonder he's in such bad spirits right now. After buying the Norwegian Spinosaurus, he probably won't even have the money to buy the potion. Yagus's thoughts made Hagrid nervous. What's the matter, Argus? Is it too hot? I turned the stove on a little too high. Why don't you open the door to ventilate it first? Gulu gulu. The pot on the stove shook. Hagrid immediately rushed forward to block Yagus's gaze and opened his mouth to say something else. Finally, he gave way and took out a huge egg from the pot. This is the egg of the Norwegian Spinosaurus. Even if he didn't know the plot, Yagus could tell the origin of the egg with his knowledge. That's right. Ha ha ha. I know, Yagus, you like these cute little guys as much as I do. After revealing the truth, Hagrid was obviously much more relaxed and carefully took the dragon eggs out of the pot. I won this from a stranger. For some reason, he seemed eager to lose to me. You don't want to keep it around, do you? It doesn't look like much now, but before long it will grow to be as big as your house. Once an accident occurs, there is only death waiting for it. Yagus really didn't want anything to happen to Hagrid. He didn't know if Harry met Snape and Quirrell while wearing the invisibility cloak and traveling at night like in the original book. But one thing is certain, without Hermione, Harry and Ron could not find any information about Nico Flamel. In all likelihood, Hagrid will not come to him for help. It is also impossible for this Norwegian Spinosaurus to be picked up by Ron's brother Charlie like in the original book. Click. Click. The dragon egg suddenly beat violently, and the crisp sound of the eggshell breaking was heard. Look, Argus, it's coming out. Hagrid excitedly grabbed Yagus's shoulder, and the huge force made Yagus couldn't help but cry out in pain. Sorry. Hagrid hurriedly let go of his hand and apologized to Yagus, but was soon attracted by the young dragon in front of him. What a beautiful little guy. Look at this little guy, he thinks of me as his mother. As he spoke, Brother High touched the baby dragon's head with his finger, and even if he was bitten by the baby dragon, he didn't take it seriously. Hello, Norbert. Yagos, it's playing with me. Would you like to try it too? Yagus forced a smile. I'll forget it. He didn't think he had the same resistance as Hagrid. If he was bitten by the Norwegian Spinosaurus, he would have to be sent to the hospital immediately. Before he finished speaking, Norbert coughed a few times and spit out a mouthful of flames. Almost burned off Hagrid's beard. It seems like it still needs some training. Who's there? The figure outside the cabin window caught Hagrid's attention. Hearing the sound, the figure disappeared instantly. Yagus opened the door and saw a head of red hair flying down the path. Ron. Why is he secretly lying on the window? Hagrid looked confused. No matter what his reason is, Noble's existence has been exposed, and it is best to move it as soon as possible. If you don't mind, the Saints group just built a dragon farm recently, and you can put Norbert in it. It won't keep you from taking care of it. Yagus didn't expect that so much time had passed and Ron was still staring at him. I couldn't help cursing myself for my negligence. Hagrid hesitated. We are friends, Ron shouldn't snitch, right? Hagrid, you also know what happened between Ron and me. Of course he won't snitch on you alone, but it's different with me. Besides, if he didn't feel guilty, he wouldn't have been lying on the window just now. He could have just come in when he heard your voice. Argos shook his head, shattering Hagrid's illusions. Is this really going to happen? Norbert has just come out of his shell. It's still so young, it can't live without its mother. Hagrid looked sad and looked at the young dragon on the table with a look of reluctance. This is the best way. Put it in the Saint's dragon farm. You still have a chance to take a look. Once caught by people from the Ministry of Magic. You know the consequences better than I do. Hagrid seemed to think about what happened to Aragog, and his expression became even sadder. After a long time, I sat down on the chair in despair. Argus, when are you going to have someone come and take Norbert away? As soon as tomorrow night. Ah, so fast, can you? Argus interrupted Hagrid's plea without mercy. Hagrid, we can't gamble. Hide Norbert first. I will send someone to pick him up tomorrow. On the other side, Ron stumbled back to the Gryffindor dormitory. What's wrong with you, Ron? Harry couldn't help but ask when he saw Ron in a panic. Harry, you'll never guess what I just saw. What did you see? I just went to Hagrid's place with that evil Slytherin, and saw that they secretly kept a dragon in the house. Are you stalking Argus again? Harry frowned. Our mission now is to find Nico Flamel as quickly as possible. Find out what Snape wants. Why do you always stare at Yagus? Ron was very dissatisfied. Have you forgotten what we saw on the third floor last time? He must have an ulterior secret. We can't sit idly by and watch. But Hagrid is our friend, and you will get him killed if you tell us. Ron suddenly withered. It is true that he is jealous and disgusted with Argus, but he does not want to harm Hagrid because of it. Then let's go tell Professor McGonagall. I can't just watch that evil Slytherin bewitch Hagrid. With that said, he walked towards Professor McGonagall's office. Harry had no choice but to follow behind. When Ron and Harry took Professor McGonagall to Hagrid's hut, it was already empty. Only Hagrid and Tooth were roasting something around the stove. Professor McGonagall. Harry and Ron. Why are you here? Hagrid remembered Yagus's advice and couldn't help but feel happy in her heart. The eyes looking at Ron and Harry couldn't help but bring a hint of disappointment. Sorry, Hagrid, I need to confirm something with you. Professor McGonagall looked serious, picked up the wand and waved it lightly. A pale silver light filled Hagrid's cabin, and after about 2 minutes, Professor McGonagall felt relieved. He gave Hagrid an apologetic smile. Sorry, Hagrid, I just heard from Mr. Weasley that you and Mr. Grindelwald had a dragon in the cabin, so I came to check it out. Impossible, Professor McGonagall. They must have made a mistake. Hagrid used his loud voice to hide his guilt. I think so too. Professor McGonagall smiled at Hagrid, then turned to look at Ron, her eyes becoming stern. Mr. Weasley, I suppose you need to explain. Lying, going out at night during curfew time, slandering classmates. Have you forgotten what Mrs. Molly said last time she came to school? Ron originally wanted to refute, but when he heard his mother's name, he immediately withered and hung his head without daring to speak. Because of your behavior that violates school rules, I will deduct 50 points from Gryffindor. And you will be detained for a week. And you, Mr. Potter. Harry felt aggrieved and felt that he had suffered an unreasonable disaster. Ron was relieved. As long as you don't tell your mother, anything will be fine. Anyway, this is not the first time that points have been deducted, just deduct points. But he couldn't figure out where Yagus returned to school. The secret passage Argus entered through the Marauder's map did not lead directly to the Slytherin common room. Instead, he came to the castle corridor. He ran into a skinny cat walking towards him. Mrs. Norris. Yagus did not show fear like ordinary little wizards, and took the initiative to touch its head. I'm sorry, I didn't prepare fried fish for you today. Isn't Mr. Filch with you? Talk about Cao Cao arrives. Filch's heavy footsteps sounded, and his gloomy face immediately softened when he saw Yagus. Hello Mr. Filch. I wanted to look for you on Christmas a few days ago, but unfortunately I couldn't find you. Looking for me? Filch was puzzled. Yagus took out a small box from his pocket, took out his wand and pointed it at it. Get bigger quickly. The small box returns to its original shape, and the exquisite patterns slowly emerge. Could this be? Filch's tone was trembling, and an unbelievable idea appeared in his mind. Yagus smiled and handed the gift box over. Merry Christmas, Mr. Filch. This is a Christmas gift for you. I hope you can forgive its tardiness. Really for me. Filch took the gift, his hands shaking uncontrollably. Over the years, every festival has been the most uncomfortable time for him. Everyone is celebrating, chatting with friends and giving each other gifts. Except for him. Always alone. Only Mrs. Norris was there for company. Moreover, he has worked at Hogwarts for so many years and has never even heard a word of thanks and respect. Not to mention receiving Christmas gifts. Thinking of this, Filch's eyes couldn't help but moisten. Thank you for your gift. Mr. Grindelwald. You're welcome, open it and have a look, Mr. Filch. Okay. Filch had never felt so excited. Shivering, I opened the gift box. Inside is a thick coat, full of materials but not too gorgeous. Perfect for Filch's night cruise. Try it on, Mr. Filch. Filch couldn't even speak clearly. He hurriedly put the lantern on the ground and put on the coat. The clothes are very thick and can bring warmth even in the cold winter. Very suitable for you, Mr. Filch. It's getting late, so I'll leave first. See you tomorrow. Argus had just walked a few steps when Filch's call suddenly came from behind him. Mr. Grindelwald. You are a respectable wizard. Thank you for the compliment, Mr. Filch. I wish you a sweet dream. The next day, after Yagus woke up, he wrote a letter to Vita and asked her to send someone to Hagrid's hut to receive Norbert. Then came to the Great Hall of Hogwarts. After everyone in Gryffindor noticed the changes in the hourglass of the Academy Cup, they didn't show much shock. In other words, they are used to it. Only Ron looked at Yagus with gritted teeth. Yagus didn't care. The reputation of the Weasley family has almost been destroyed by you alone, and you still have the nerve to cause trouble. If Dumbledore hadn't looked out for your parents, he would have kicked you away. I just don't know if you will encounter Quirrell sucking blood in the Forbidden Forest tonight. However, this has nothing to do with me. Time flies by. June is coming soon, and the weather is getting hotter and hotter, but the witches of Hogwarts are not wearing cool clothes. At Dumbledore's request, Harry finally found clues about Nicholas Flamel under the guidance of Argus. Unfortunately, before he had time to explore further, an important event changed his next goal. Final exam is coming soon. Without Hermione, Harry and Ron are completely blind now. As the final exam approached, the atmosphere in the entire castle became depressing. The person who came to Argus most during this period was neither Harry nor Draco. Instead, it was Hermione who was sorted into Ravenclaw. As both top students, Hermione and Argus had completely different reactions when facing exams. Argus was indifferent, but Hermione was extremely nervous, afraid that something would go wrong with her. If she hadn't been worried about delaying Yagus for too long, she would have been pestering her 24 hours a day to ask questions. Yagos, the final exam is coming soon, why are you not nervous at all? At the Slytherin table, Draco looked sad and complained to Argus. Pansy pouted. Draco, Argus goes to the library every day after class. I don't know what grade he has studied. You think everyone is like you, joining the Quidditch team every day after class and not even doing your homework properly. Draco whined in agony. Argus, why don't you cast the Imperious Curse on me and control me to take the final exam? Okay, stop howling. If you have the time, you might as well read more books. Pansy said dissatisfied. No need to argue, the notes have been prepared for you a long time ago. They are all the key points of the first grade. As long as you read them carefully and memorize them carefully, you can still get an A or E. Yagus put down the knife in his hand and smiled to appease the two of them. For him who had experienced exam-oriented education in his previous life, dealing with this kind of exam was a piece of cake. The biggest advantage of traditional exam-oriented education is that others are learning knowledge, while you are studying for exams. Maybe I'm not your opponent when it comes to real materials, but I'm not necessarily worse than you when it comes to exams. Yagus himself doesn't need these, but that doesn't mean others can't. Goyle, Crabbe, and Draco, who is addicted to Quidditch, all need urgent tutoring. Let me tell you, I can help you with this exam, but you must make up all your homework during the holidays. If I catch you being lazy, you know the consequences. Yagos, I love you. Draco was extremely excited and hugged Yagus, earning a look of disgust from Yagus. Stay there for a while, I don't have this hobby. Before the examination room, the freshmen in the first grade were worried, but the seniors didn't care at all. He even thought of teasing them. Argus stood on the high platform, in front of a group of Slytherin freshmen. Today is our first exam at Hogwarts. I hope everyone will give it their best. I can allow you to fail and fail. But one thing is, you must not cheat. Remember, you are carrying the glory of the entire Slytherin. Yes, Chief. The voices of the little snakes attracted the attention of many people. Yagus nodded slightly. Don't worry, I have summarized the key points of this semester for you in my notes. As long as you memorize it carefully, passing will not be a problem. Go in. Under the command of Argus, everyone in Slytherin filed in. Unlike Muggle exams, Hogwarts exams not only require written tests, but also practical applications. Passing both of them is considered as passing the exam. The first exam was the Charms class. Professor Flitwick was very tolerant towards his students, and the questions he asked were not difficult. But for most young wizards who don't like learning very much, they are still scratching their heads anxiously. Parchments and quills have been placed in the classroom, and anti-cheating spells have been cast on them. In order to prevent students from leaking questions, 4 colleges will generally choose a unified written test. As Professor Flitwick announced the start of the exam, the only sound echoing in the huge classroom was the rustling of the pen tip touching the parchment. As expected, Argus was the first to complete the written test, and handed the parchment to Professor Flitwick under the envious eyes of everyone. Perfect answer. Professor Flitwick looked at it a few times and exclaimed exaggeratedly. Mr. Grindelwald, I hope your next use of the spell will bring me even greater surprises. As you wish, Professor Flitwick. Yagus bowed slightly and strode out of the classroom. Contrary to Argus, Hermione always struggled with the questions and tried her best to write the answers as perfect as possible. Even though she, like Yagus, had memorized the first-grade textbooks by heart, she still waited until the end before handing in the test paper. As soon as she walked out of the examination room, Hermione couldn't wait to sit next to Argus and answer the questions. He looks very much like the top student who got the correct answers in the test in his previous life. Argus was desperate to keep Hermione from involuting. But when I think about it, the person who is most involved seems to be him. Not far away, Draco and Goyle stood trembling, not daring to answer the question. Although there is Yagus's guarantee, he himself knows what they will learn. If they really bring 1 or 2 tea back home, the elders in their family will strangle them to death without Yagus having to say anything. Okay, the exam is over, so don't worry about it here. Yagus smiled and comforted the lost little witch in front of him. Hermione pouted, her eyes full of unwillingness. If you give me a few more minutes, I will definitely be able to write all the answers in the book. The space given by that piece of parchment is too small, not enough to write on. Soon, Professor Flitwick completed the rearrangement of the classroom. Let everyone enter the classroom for the exam in order according to the order of the original division. The test content is also very simple, just let a pineapple tap dance across the desk. After saying that, Professor Flitwick waved his magic wand, and pineapples appeared on everyone's table one after another. For ordinary little wizards, they may need to think about what magic spells are needed, but for Yagus, this kind of thing is simply not too simple. With a few taps of the magic wand, arms and legs slowly grew out of the pineapple's feet, and a pair of exquisite dancing shoes were put on them. Along with the rhythm of flapping her palms, Pineapple used her round figure to tell everyone what it means to be a dancer. The graceful dance steps combined with its naive movements made Professor Flitwick laugh. Great, Mr. Grindelwald. It's a pity that you are not a Ravenclaw student. With you here, I can save a lot of worry. Yagus smiled and did not respond. With his case in mind, other little wizards felt that maybe this exam was not as difficult as they thought. But when they actually did it, they discovered that the exam was not difficult. It is clear that Yagus is not on the same level as them. The smarter ones will choose to stop and rethink temporarily. There is no set time for the exam anyway, and it is better to go slower than to fail the exam. There are some people who just don't believe in evil. For example, Ron. Children of this age like to be in the limelight, so how could he just watch Yagus take the lead alone? Evil Slytherin. He only uses dark magic. He glared at Yagus angrily, picked up the wand and pointed it at the pineapple in front of him. But compared with the original work, the strength and performance of the savior team that lost Hermione are not even a bit worse. Even the magic spells taught by the teacher in class may not be able to be cast, let alone the exam. Boom. There was a muffled sound, and the pineapple in front of Ron instantly grew 7 or 8 legs. Like a giant octopus by the Hogwarts lake, it opened its teeth and claws and rushed towards the little wizards around it. The other little wizards were startled, and Pineapple, who had just changed a little, instantly returned to its original shape. What's more, his pineapples disturbed the demolition wizards at Hogwarts. Bang! Bang bang! The pineapple in front of Seamus' table exploded, and the orange flesh even splashed into Professor Flitwick's face. Cleaned up. Professor Flitwick was also a duel champion after all, and he reacted very quickly. He immediately cleared the affected table and prepared a new serving of pineapple for the little wizard. Professor Flitwick, this was an accident, please give me another chance. Realizing that he had almost gotten into trouble, Ron quickly begged for mercy. Unfortunately, it's too late. Although Professor Flitwick is gentle, he does not condone it blindly. One exam is over and the next one is coming soon. Professor McGonagall's serious face made many young wizards feel a little nervous. The Transfiguration exam is not as simple as charms. After the written test, Professor McGonagall asked them to turn a mouse into a snuff box. The more beautiful the box, the higher the score. With Yagis's transformation skills, it is not difficult to complete the exam, but he needs to think about what kind of snuff box is considered exquisite. After a little thought, Yagis first turned the mouse into a high-end silver-gray box, and then began to carve patterns on the box. Hogwarts Castle is filled with smoke, and the Black Lake is blooming with ripples. A giant octopus can be seen faintly wandering inside. Professor McGonagall, I'm done. After doing all this, Yagis raised his hand. Professor McGonagall was not surprised by this, and even took it for granted. But when she actually saw the snuff box made by Yagis, she couldn't help but stare straight at it. Mr. Grindelwald, your talent is truly amazing. I never thought that a first-year wizard could understand the nature of transfiguration. You taught me well. Yagis said modestly. Mr. Grindelwald, there is no need to be so modest. No matter how good the teaching is, it is impossible to accomplish without talent. Professor McGonagall took out her quill and drew a big O behind Argus's name. Okay, Mr. Grindelwald, don't put pressure on the little wizards here. Hurry up and prepare for the potions exam in the afternoon. Miss Granger will not give you the top spot in the grade easily. The day's exams are over. The most troublesome potions lesson was also completed under Snape's close watch. Many students who usually achieved good grades frequently made mistakes under his cold gaze. Especially Gryffindor. If it weren't for the exam, Snape would have definitely deducted dozens of points. Dinner time. All the freshmen breathed a sigh of relief. But they dare not relax, the exam will continue tomorrow. Countless little wizards holding textbooks formed a strange landscape. Especially around Yagis, the most people gathered. One day of exams made them completely give up the idea of muddle through and could only choose to improvise. Even if you can't hold it, you still have to try to rub it. After all, the potions exam is already over. With Snape's temper, even if you complete it perfectly, he will at most give you an A. If you get an E, your ancestors will burn incense. Judging from the timeline, exam week is the time when Voldemort and Harry have their first decisive battle. I just don't know what day it is. More importantly, after Ron snitched last time, Hagrid also had a hard time with them both. Whether they can get the final clue from Hagrid's mouth is anyone's guess. While eating, Argus quietly glanced at Harry and Ron. At this time, the two of them were each holding a book in their hands, and they showed no signs of continuing to look for clues from Hagrid. Depends on what Dumbledore has arranged. With Harry in his current state, he probably won't have the guts to fight Voldemort like in the original book. But the Philosopher's Stone is indeed a good thing. If you have the chance to get it, you may not want to try it. I prepared some magic items when I went home last time, and with the bloody battle between Voldemort and Harry over, my condition will definitely not be much better. While thinking, Yagis answered questions for the wizards around him who came to ask questions. His notes can only guarantee a passing grade, but there are always people who want to pursue higher grades, so it is reasonable to ask the most famous academic master of Hogwarts. The night passed. A new round of exams is about to begin. Today's first game is the most relaxed defense against dark arts game. These students had no idea who Quirrell was and thought he was a cowardly good-natured man. Especially Harry and Ron. After Harry witnessed Snape threatening Quirrell. I firmly believe that Quirrell is the guardian of the Philosopher's Stone and the hero who secretly fights against Snape. My fondness for Quirrell is growing day by day. Ron is relatively simple. His affection for Professor Quirrell is only because Quirrell no longer lets Yagus go to his office. When he first learned about this, he was excited for a while. In contrast, Yagus's heart was not so peaceful. It will be no more than a week before Voldemort takes action in the plot. At the most critical moment, Voldemort will definitely try his best to improve his success rate. There are only two people in Hogwarts who can potentially help him. One is Snape, and the other is myself. Compared to Snape, who had never been in contact since his parasitism, he was obviously a better choice. As the door to the examination room opened, Quirrell walked out and arranged for the new students to enter one by one in a stumbling tone. The test papers were handed out quickly. The question was not difficult, and Yagus completed it in less than 1/3 of the time. He originally wanted to wait for others to hand in their papers and hand them in along with him, thus minimizing contact with Quirrell. But when I think about the magic that will be used later, I have a one-on-one conversation with Quirrell anyway. Then he felt relieved and raised his hand generously. Professor Quirrell, my test paper is finished. There was a gasp and hiss from the crowd. Voldemort seemed not to show up for this exam, and Quirrell looked timid from beginning to end. Only when he saw Yagus, a trace of hatred burst out in his eyes. Professor Quirrell, test paper. Yagus stood up and handed over the test paper. The moment he came into contact with Quirrell, he heard Quirrell say something quickly in a voice that only the two of them could hear. Tomorrow night, go to the restricted area on the 3rd floor. Yagus didn't intend to pay attention, turned around and left. But as soon as he turned around, he saw Quirrell picking up the pen and staring straight at his test paper, and couldn't help but hesitate for a moment. Quirrell's face showed a smile of success, and he continued in an extremely small voice, Mr. Grindelwald, do you think I will use my grades to threaten you? No, this is too childish. As long as you are in school, the people around you will always be your weakness. Your uncles. Play this again. Can you come up with something new? Yagus stared straight at Quirrell with his blue eyes, filled with unstoppable murderous intent. Quirrell, however, acted as if he didn't see it at all. He casually drew a circle on Yagus's parchment, turned around and walked towards the other freshmen. Yagus took a deep breath and tried to calm down his emotions as much as possible to prevent others from seeing the clues. He looked deeply at Quirrell and left the examination room. I still overestimated Voldemort's bottom line. I keep using the same moves. I still have no idea. You can't tie them together for several days in a row, right? Even a fool can tell something is wrong. Fortunately, Voldemort has been very active this year, and he will be able to live a lot in the next few years. It was not until the Goblet of Fire that he began to be resurrected. If I had known better, I should have bought 2 pistols from the Muggle world and brought them over to see how hard his head was. While Argus was scolding Voldemort for his lack of martial ethics, he was also thinking about how to carry out his actions tomorrow night. To be honest, what really scares him is not the so-called 3 levels. It's Voldemort. Being familiar with the plot, he knew that it was impossible for Voldemort to obtain the Philosopher's Stone. Unable to be resurrected, Quirrell's body fell into a state of exhaustion. In this way, I become his alternative. He probably had this idea in mind when he sent Quirrell to call him over. No, you have to make some preparations in advance. There's still 1 day left, so we can do a lot of things. It's best to get Harry involved. I don't believe that Dumbledore can let Harry risk his life with me. After the exam was over, Yagus went to Hagrid without stopping to purchase this batch of magical animal materials in advance. Extras include Hagrid's unicorn blanket and mat. Then he wrote to Vita Rosier and asked her to send him a bottle of Felixir as soon as possible. Find the Weasley twins and spend a lot of money to buy all the dung eggs. Finally, he pretended to have some secret in front of Ron. When Draco asked him to go out to play, he refused on the excuse that he had something to do tonight. Everything is ready, just waiting for the appointed time to come. Soon the next night, Yagus drank the elixir of happiness in the dormitory. A sense of coolness rushed straight to the brain, and everything around him seemed to be different. The once obscure magic became gradually clear at this moment. Is this what a lucky potion feels like? It deserves to be called a lucky potion. With a sigh, Yagus came all the way to the restricted area on the third floor. A figure in black robe was already waiting at the door. Although his face is still pale, the ambition and confidence in his eyes are difficult for ordinary people to possess. The look he looked at Yagus was even more greedy. Yagus showed no dissatisfaction. With a smile on his face, he bowed slightly and performed a standard aristocratic salute. Teacher, long time no see. Thanks for watching, please subscribe and support our channel.